Okay, so today is Wednesday, April 30th, 2025, and we have more than a quorum, and we have a lot of visitors and people of interest in our midst here. We will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, which Mike Gallagher will lead us.
That's my son. Salute and pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Chair.
Okay, Amy, we'll start with a roll call.
Good Wednesday morning to everybody. Thank you for coming out bright and early. We appreciate that. We'll start with a roll call with Board Member Audit.
Here.
Board Member Cry.
Present.
Board Member Gallagher.
Here.
Board Member Kellstrom.
Here.
Board Member Plummer.
Here.
Board Member Lata.
Here.
And Chair Watkins.
Present.
Wonderful.
Maybe.
Chair, I can confirm that we also have a quorum.
Okay. So, John, did you want to quickly introduce your?
Yeah, we'll do staff introductions here quickly. So with us this morning, Executive Assistant Ian Lindsay and our Chief Fiscal Officer Jessica Carlson, Accounting Clerk Kelly Irving, Senior Planners Keith Williams, Jennifer Paula, Michael Cooker, Assistant Planner Laura Beauregard, and happy to announce we have a new staff member here on board, Associate Planner Moen Kalui. Moen joins us from at the end of March is when he started, so he's just wrapping up his first month here at the office. He joined us from Seattle, Washington, where he was working and also had recently completed his PhD in transportation engineering last year. And he's going to be taking on some of our technical planning aspects. So our travel model, our data dashboard project, work with staff on a regional traffic count program, performance tracking of our transportation system with our partners, and other projects. So you see him around after the meeting or over the next few months, who's welcome Moen to the team. With that ends my staff introductions. Oh, I forgot, legal counsel, Don Henry.
Okay. Thank you very much. We are going to skip item 5 because we have a time constraint and we want to make sure we have a quorum. We also have item 11, which is noted that we will not hear before 9 o'clock. So we'll watch that as we go forward. We are now on item 6, public comment period. Is there anybody who would like to address us during public comment? And Amy, do you have anybody from outside that would like to address us?
I do not have anyone online.
Okay, well then, seeing nobody, we will close the public comment period. We have our consent agenda, several items on there. They'll all be voted on by one motion. Does anybody have anything they'd like to pull? Any board members?
I have a few comments on 7.3 that I don't.
Okay, we will address some comment. We'll address those and we'll still take them all at one time.
Yeah, I have a question on 7.5 too.
Okay. Go ahead, Mike.
Okay. On the correspondence for this hydrogen fuel cell partnership, some of the comments, I was just a little, most of you know, and some of you don't, but I tend to be a little disturbed by some of the language used in these. The nascent fuel cell electric truck market requires de-risking. There's no page numbers. It's just the February 27th letter, I believe, to the director, Annan Rasul. There's a paragraph. These are recommendations. So I'm a little happy that we're ahead of the game here, but a successful hydrogen fueling network requires adequate funding. Hydrogen infrastructure remains significantly underrepresented in California's zero-emission vehicle infrastructure funding. We greatly appreciate that Caltrans and CEC will aggressively pursue funding for hydrogen fueling infrastructure development in the future in the spirit of CTC's SB 671 work. I did not read SB 671, but I just will remind myself and others that this is all taxpayer dollars. We're talking about, I will continue to believe that this should be generated through the private sector based on demand. I don't think we should be subsidizing the fuel cell electric truck market by putting in the infrastructure that's required to fuel these vehicles. I think that has to come from the private sector. I don't like when, I know this is what government does. We build the infrastructure, we subsidize it, we spend billions of dollars doing it, but I'm going to continue to beat that horse, Chris, just because I don't think that the taxpayer, the public fund should be subsidizing these types of projects. That's just I think we should build roads and we should create infrastructure that way, but not when we're going to be subsidizing for-profit other.
Are you gonna make a motion, Mike, on it?
The successful commercial rollout of hydrogen fuel cell trucks is dependent on adequate hydrogen fueling infrastructure implementation, but not by the taxpayer. So I just wanted to bring that to light, and I think we'll find one other. So in closing, we thank the California Energy Commission and Caltrans for your continued leadership and commitment to advancing zero emission transportation. It says, establishing a comprehensive hydrogen fueling corridor along Interstate 5 is a crucial step toward achieving California's clean energy, air pollution reduction, and decarbonization goals. We've seemed to have lost the term greenhouse gas. It's now decarbonization. Is it carbon dioxide that we want to remove from the atmosphere, or is it carbon, actual solids out of the atmosphere? I want to breathe clean air. I think this is all going to come out very near future of what's actually going on with our climate and our atmosphere. And I hope that all this is going away, because like global warming that we got lied to about for 40 years, it's now climate change, but now you don't even hear that anymore. So I just want to continue to be consistent with my disapproval of these types of programs. And we're obviously spending a lot of time and energy and probably financial taxpayer dollars on continuing the lie. So
Mike, you and Greg spend more time on those two issues than you have for the 3 years. So what's your vote no on it? Want to push back? What do you think?
Well, I mean, it's just this is my point.
Exactly. But I'm saying, as we talked the last couple of years, we've taken a stand a couple of times.
Yeah.
Caltrans wants to take one down there. So
yeah.
Where do you want to go? I mean, instead of us
I just want to live in the truth.
Yeah.
I want us to move forward in government and the private sector. I want it based on the truth. And the truth is that they're manipulating the climate and driving trillions of dollars of spending of taxpayer dollars based on the fact that they're changing the climate through aerosol injection through the back end of multiple airplanes. And if you watch, there's a report out that there's now been 2 arrests in Florida, and they're talking about that the U.S. military is involved. So we already have the data that it's actually happening. We just have to get on board and go, oh, we should plan differently and do something different, because if we left the climate alone, it'd be just fine.
So I think, Chris, to answer your question, he's just bringing this up. This is
my mom,
more
right?
fun, and this board is going to be watching any of the recommendations that come out of here. But since this is just a letter and we're receiving a report, I think it's duly noted.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to vent for a minute.
Okay.
Thank you.
Matt Plummer,
Yes.
item 7.
So on 7.5, and I know this came up at the fiscal and policy meeting, and I didn't get time to get to meet with you individually, but one of the things that came up there was how Shasta County's allocation has gone down significantly in the LTF. So this is from 3.2 in the 21-22 to now we're at 2.7, so about $500,000, and that seems to correspond with an increase in the city of Reddings by about that amount. And so I know there was that it's driven by population, but I wasn't sure that population had changed that much. So I was curious if the, what the explanation is for that change.
I'm sorry, so your 21-22, where you're saying that the total amount is roughly the same? And then what has happened between the 7.4 million in allocations in 21-22 to the estimates of 7.3 million?
Correct. Yeah.
So just a reminder too, and I did say this in Fiscal and Policy Committee, is just that the estimates vary greatly to the allocations because of all the other factors that are involved in the TDA budget that come up to what we actually end up paying out in payment instructions. And so even at the change of population, possibly, give or take a few percent, that number is going to be different in estimate because you're not factoring in the other TDA budget restrictions or formulas that we have that compute to the final allocation. So just to be clear, the bottom four rows are actual allocations, what we ended up paying out to each jurisdiction on those fiscal years of the TDA budget. These estimates are vary greatly because what comes into that actual number is outside of population as well. So just strictly on population, you're going to have that loan potentially a different number. I would just say a different number. It's not necessarily lower or higher, but when that comes to what we end up actually paying out to the city of Reading and to Shasta County, you're going to be including policies that we're actually reviewing right now, like the spillover that affects the city of Reading's LTF ask because they're training it for STA to lower their transit obligation. Or the county now has given quite a number of transit obligations that they used to administer, like Bernie Express, for example, that are no longer contributing to their bottom line that they get in LTF. That would give them a little boost. And so there's various little formulas and board actions that have taken place that factor into that final number. So you'll see that 7.3 number is going to change between now and June.
Okay.
And so when we calculate population comes out from the Department of Finance, California Department of Finance on May 1st, so tomorrow. And then we're going to start computing that TDA budget. And so we can work really closely with you so you could watch how that 2.6 number for Shasta County will go up or down depending on all those different formulaic factors that compute into that. So I did not look into the population in 21-22 versus what we're looking at now. But even this 25-26 estimate is based on the population from 23-24 because we don't get the new numbers until tomorrow. So unfortunate, and this is kind of why we moved it to a report that you receive as a board rather than we used to approve it or adopt it because the numbers vary so greatly between now and when the TDA budget comes in June. But this is a state requirement of the Transportation Development Act that we have to at least give it a good shot. And so this is our good shot.
Okay, any other questions or comments on the consent calendar?
Make a motion to approve.
It was moved by Chris Kelstrom and I heard 2 seconds. We'll go with Kevin Cry. Can we do just a voice vote?
Yep.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. So
Thank you.
that was moving forward then to item 8. Jennifer. So this is adopt the North State Intercity Bus to Rail Plan and provide direction to staff regarding near-term activities.
Thank you very much.
This is the one I'll push back on Gallagher.
You ready? Okay. Well, thank you, board members. Yes, in advance. I don't even know what to say to that.
Nothing.
So
Just say duly noted.
duly noted. Thank you, Chair. So today we are bringing forward the North State Intercity Bus to Rail Plan in its final form for your adoption. I really wanted to draw attention to the items that, well, actually I have my consultant here from AECOM, Daniel Kraus, and he will be introducing parts of the plan that have been changed. So we do have 3 recommendations, and the third one actually has 4 items. Sorry, I'm trying to get this to go. One of these goes just one. Here, I'm gonna try sharing it. One second, let me open this.
Jen, I can run the slides if that's easier.
Do you have them?
I do.
Okay, sure. We're gonna need it though, for later items that are stored on this. Okay. So to carry on with this, if you can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So I'm going to pass it over to Daniel Kraus from AECOM. He has been the lead on this contracted service that we have for the North State Intercity Bus Rail. And then I will come up back at the end.
Thank you, Jen, and good morning, Chair, members of the board. I appreciate your time to hear this item. I guess I have to ask someone to advance it, right? So it's different on here, so I'm going to look over here. Can you go back to the last slide, please? So since we brought the draft plan to this body at your February board meeting, so we presented then. So today is really just an update on what we've done since that meeting. One thing we've done is completed the public comment period on that draft plan, which was ended on March 24th. And then the other thing we've been doing is edits to the plan to create the final plan. So the first major item with that was the strategic action plan, which is basically a synthesis of the previously presented recommendations from the draft plan. Just kind of give some more clear direction on actions moving forward. The other thing is we added an appendix that documents the written public comment from the comment period that I just was talking about earlier. And then also based on some of the partners that participated in this study, some comments came in. So we adjusted some of our cost assumptions for bus operations, based on some benchmarks we were using, especially related to RABA service. They're going to have a new operator. So we had to make adjustments related to that. And also we have some new, an increase in service for existing intercity bus private service, Flix and Greyhound. They've actually added a round trip locally, which is improved service. So we documented that in the plan. Also, of course, we did minor edits as necessary to adopt. So next slide. The other thing that we did was we did expand the community questionnaire, which at a previous meeting last fall, this body asked for more comments. We significantly have been able to do that, get more comments by increasing the length of time. So that actually ran through March 24th. And we updated the plan to reflect those comments as well. And then just recently, we're at the RABA board meeting presenting the draft plan, and I was actually there. So it was good, and now today we're here for this consideration of the final plan. So drilling down into the strategic plan is kind of the meat and bones of the project. So or the plan. Next slide. So just how do we structure this? Because basically we have these routes that we're studying from Reading to different destinations. So. And then we threw out the plan, we ranked how to prioritize this best, so we're using our resources efficiently and what makes sense to move forward with. So the top ranking route that we looked at was Reading to Sacramento, and that is something that would be a bus service down I-5 corridor. And so we developed some, and key RABA would be the lead agency kind of operating that service if it's implemented. And then the key partners, I'll just say serve as a key partner on all these. So, but we'd also have Caltrans Division Rail as they do intercity bus stuff as well, not just rail. Also, Caltrans Districts 2 and 3, the San Joaquin Joint Powers Authority, which they're already a partner, I'll talk about in a minute. And then connecting bus services such as Trax, Glen Ride, County Transit, and also Lake Transit, as well as some of the county RTPAs are partners, would be partners on this project. So in the near term, which is within 5 years, we're looking at potentially implementing a service. Potentially, actually, given all the work done previously on this corridor, it could be done within 2 years. So that's put in kind of in the near term vision and action plan here. And then in the midterm, which is up to 10 years, look at increasing service based on demand, of course. And then obviously in the long term, if rail is ever extended from the Sacramento area and Chico up to Reading, then you would adjust the service accordingly to kind of sync up with that. Moving on to the next quarter is Reading to Chico. I think most of us know that RABA recently established a bus service there as part of the throughway system with Amtrak San Joaquin's. And so RABA is running that service. And so want to just emphasize that service, making sure that continues to run and finding the resource to make sure that continues to run until there's the services established between Reading and Sacramento. And at that time, you could transfer the service over from Reading to Sacramento with a connection to Chico via the Glen Ride service as part of the Valley feeder system. So that's so just want to keep emphasis on that short-term service that's happening now. And then as time passes, rail is being considered. Rail is always long-term. So it's not really like an immediate thing that's related to this plan, but it's something just to kind of think about as we go forward. And so if rail was to be implemented in the Rito, up to Reading from Chico, which is part of that North Valley Rail that was already studied, that would be the service be run by San Joaquin Joint Powers Authority, which would run the trains. And key partners on that would also include Union Pacific, as they would own the tracks, and the Caltrans Division of Rail in Districts 2 and 3. Now, what's happening now in terms of that, it's way off in terms of actually implementation, but what's happening now is Caltrans Division of Rail is engaged in something called the Corridor ID planning process, and that's in conjunction with the Federal Railroad Administration, and they'll be doing a study here in the next, probably starting later this year. So the idea is just to make sure that representatives in this region would be at the table contributing any thoughts on that process. So that's the main focus there. Next slide, please. Moving to Reading to the Eureka Arcata corridor. That would be a bus service potentially run by Humboldt Transit or Trinity Transit or RABA or a combination. What we studied in this plan was like a 1-seat ride that would so you could really speed up service. However, what we're looking at in the near term would be to build off of the momentum that the region's already been in discussions with related to the North State Express plan, which has been led by Humboldt Transit and RABA and others. And so they have a list of improvements that would increase service now using the existing bus operators in the corridor. So that's the real focus right now. And then as time goes on in the midterm, we could start studying the possibility of a 1-seat ride from Reading to the Eureka corridor, which would further speed up service. And then, obviously in the long term, that could be implemented. So moving to Reading to Eugene via Ashland Medford, that would be an intercity bus service that would cross state lines. So we're not sure who exactly, haven't identified a lead operator for that yet, but would need Caltrans Division of Rail involved with that to provide communication with Oregon DOT, as well as Caltrans District 2. And the thought here would be to, start slow on this and do a phasing approach and maybe potentially run intercity bus service north within the North State region, up to near the border. And that's a phase 1. And then you could go phase 2, Reading to the Ashland Medford, which is a pretty big destination as well in Southern Oregon, and then on to Eugene as a phase 3. Now, the midterm, potentially in the short, near term, you could potentially institute one of that first phase. And then moving to the midterm, you would have phase 2 and long-term phase 3. And then Reading to Reno, which was not as highly prioritized and ranked as part of the study. However, there's still interest in it. So the idea is we just have some conversations with Nevada DOT, as that's another interstate route. And so to see if that's something we're pursuing in the future. And next slide, please. Next slide, please. There we go. And then we have one thing we're not recommending moving forward on is the Reading, Klamath Falls, Eugene intercity rail service. Through our analysis, we discovered that the demand was light and the cost and implementation were great and difficult. So the idea is let's not focus on that right now, but rather let's focus on what the rail service is today. And that's the Amtrak Coast Starlight long distance service. And there's been a lot of issues identified with that access here. So improving access to Reading and the North State is a high priority. And so working with Amtrak and others to see if there's a way to increase access with better seating availability, better arrival and departure times, as well as just increasing the reliability of the service. So improving what we have.
Like how long do you spend on, just out of curiosity, on deciding that there wasn't a demand for Reading to Klamath Falls to Eugene?
In terms of like studying it?
Yeah, I lived there for 3 years, took a coaching job. I could have told you, you could have called me and I said, yeah, nobody cares. I'm just curious, like how much resource and time is spent on something like that, right?
This is one of 6 quarters we studied. So, we just it's a very high level study. So we didn't spend a lot of time, especially, you're right, we identified that as quite quickly that was pretty low demand. And therefore we, were able to be efficient about that. So
I was curious.
Yeah. And then just in terms of facilitating all these corridors, if they're implemented, it would kind of emanate out of Reading as a hub. So the idea is we have really good bones right now already for a hub. We've got the RABA passenger terminal, we've got Amtrak station, we've got the bike station, and and maybe adding some micromobility, really figure out a way to strengthen that, as a holistic cohesive hub in the central part of Reading and kind of tying all those together even further. And so that might be something to focus on, just kind of facilitate all these different corridors. So with that, I will pass it back to Jen for the last part.
Do any of the board members have any other comments or questions? I have one. Going back to your very first slide there, you were talking about implementing the salmon runner within 2 years.
That would ideally, I think we put the word ideally just because, but there's been a lot of work on that over the years with different studies, and this plan reinforced the viability of that corridor. So, and there's some partners like San Joaquin Joint Powers Authority, which they're working with, on the current service between Reading and Chico. They've indicated a willingness to potentially partner on that as well.
It seemed like a big item of that would be to try it, to see what the demand really is. And since there is not an electric bus that will do it, an EV, that understand that RABA has a couple of diesel buses that could be put into service to actually try it and, put a big sign on the sign and say we're salmon runner and not tell anybody that they're running on fossil fuels, but it would try out the system. And RABA has actually.
Yeah, so with that,
This is my exact question. Does salmon runner have to mean an electric bus? Because I know that it was introduced that way. And so now it's like a trigger.
No,
where
it
is, and I did mention this, sorry, and that's why some of those edits that occurred were to really get away from the term salmon runner and say I-5 service.
So it does not have to be an electric.
The only thing that you might see,
2029, you can't buy
But you can run it.
You can run it till 2040.
Okay.
so if you look at the salmon runner logo, there's a fish and there's a sundial bridge, and if you look really closely at the end of the fish, it's lightning bolts. That's really the only thing that says that this is
Change the
electric.
name?
yes,
It's really a
we
trigger.
could always change the name, the route system. So we've had a conversation, John Ando, he is on the call remotely, so he's available for questions. Well, we will work with him to look into this and everything related to this type of service. Daniel's correct. In conversation with Amtrak and SJJPA, they've identified a need to partner within the next 2 to 3 years. From a state perspective, the state would like to be able to try something out to see how that goes forward. You're right. You already have vehicles that we use for Reading to Chico. That is a service that we have that are diesel that meet a lot of the requirements that John Ando, for example, I've been in discussion with him, transit manager for RABA. He has identified that when you partner with Amtrak and San Joaquin, they have certain requirements with vehicles, the way they're outfitted and different things that we have. So he's looking at that and what are those requirements, those buses that we already have would make sense to start out with an initial service potentially. It would meet all of the other vehicle requirements that you need to have. I know there's been discussions like Mr. Gallagher and I had before related to smaller size vehicles. Those may or may not be available as an option. I don't know where that fits in with him when you're trying to get funding from Amtrak and SJJPA. Those are ongoing discussions that we've been working on having, and John Ando has been having with their staff at those agencies as well. So in terms of routing, like what we have seen with RABA is the intercity service from Rennie to Chico, they're very specific, like 99X or these different types of numbering that they use. So it's very likely the service is going to have some type of a numbering that Amtrak and SJJPA, if it starts, meets whatever coordination requirements they have, right? So they may have also say into what the final kind of, if you want to call it branding of that route is to function within the other services and connect to all of the other routes.
And that's the pushback that I wanted to. It's nothing against you guys, nothing against the report, nothing against anything. But I think we need to send a letter to CARB and let them know that all this work being done and all this stuff that you guys have done, their regulations and their mandates are going to make all of this obsolete. Because after 2029, you can no longer buy diesel hybrid buses. You can only run them until 2040. So, Robin's going to buy as many as they possibly can in 2029 because they work and this does, and electric buses don't. So that's why I would like to send a letter to CARB with this report and say, hey, we've done all this work. We've identified all these corridors that would work, but right now, none of them will run with an electric bus. And your regulations are going to make all this work obsolete in 4 years. So that was my pushback.
Yeah, no, and we appreciate that. We've talked about that before, and that is one of the intents of when, I won't assume, but going through if the, board adopts the plan and everything, part of that is like we talked about the RABA board meeting, share with the Air Resources Board, Caltrans, Caltrans Division of Rail, the California Transportation Commission, Amtrak, SJJPA, Federal Transit Administration, Federal Highway Administration, across the board, anyone that's related to passenger rail, passenger bus, and those activities, sharing with them and sharing here. We have done a North State specific study related to all these services. There's also the North State Express concept that Humboldt Transit Authority has done to say, look, our partners, our community folks that serve everyone in here have come up with ideas and those needs for efficiency to have connected systems. No, we're talking about, we've done the study, work with us because we identify the funding needs or the other service needs, such as certain technologies and canyons and stuff to right size it. We've got the data now, take our plan, use it to inform your state plans that you go through in the future and the steps. So
that California Resource Board, they're all appointed, I know, but I mean, do they have people from different parts of the state or are they just all Sacramento bureaucrats?
They do have people from different parts of the state.
But they're like-minded.
I mean, I don't think so because they come from industry and they're not always, but they also have to follow the rule of the law. And there are laws that say that CARB has to do certain things. So
part of this is to provide direction to staff. So I think, Chris, what you brought up is part of the direction that we're giving to staff. And one of the goals is to reduce vehicle miles traveled. And so if you really look at the broad picture, if we had some sort of a bus that would go to Sacramento Airport and on to Sacramento, it could potentially reduce vehicle miles traveled, even though it is diesel. And so I think that's duly noted.
And I'll add to, I think something that we talked about briefly during some questions during the RABA meeting that was where we previously had is we talked about, how the service helps with other needs. And for example, and I think Tehama County is actually even on the remotely here on the call is RABA's had to coordinate with Tehama County Transportation Commission on being able to get veterans that are in Tehama County to the Veterans Clinic that's on the road.
Right.
So that has been very challenging for the operators to do that because of their fund sources and the fund sources, depending on if it's a federal fund source or state funding source for operations, they put restrictions on where you can include. Can you cross county boundaries? All this wonderful fun stuff they have to deal with to make those services work. If you have a service like this, that allows actually greater efficiency in multiple counties. So the different folks such as veterans can get the veteran clinic here or the next closest one that is in, further south between Redding and Sacramento. for other needs that we have that people are needing these intercity services. And one component of this is the fact that identified in with all the partners is identifying and starting at least trying out to see how it performs. A service along I-5 helps connect the entire North State. The I-5 is an area where we do have a gap between a lot of services. A lot of our coastal partners, trans operators have coordinated. We've got good coordination between Humboldt, Trinity, and RABA with from Eureka to Reading, but it's getting those connections and having a seamless system down through I-5 and the partners identified, both especially in Glenn and Tehama County as partners on the project have been a part of it for conversations for several years, continue to say there's a need and they could help make efficiency with the other stops along. With that, I'll hand it. Oh.
Well, I
A few
just,
questions.
oh, go ahead.
My first is what we did ask for more response, so
Yeah.
it looked like we got double what we had before. Is that
We're at about 260.
okay? So it was like in the 30s and
400,
60s.
but
Yeah, yeah.
260 was, it was a very significant, I think we had 100 to start off, like when we did the first.
When we did that first, it wasn't very many.
Yeah, so we
Okay,
got
so that works.
almost.
Okay, perfect. Okay, and then, so one, if we could strike the word salmon runner from any future, that would be great. But I have, if we say yes to this, just so that I understand it, if we approve this, what exactly happens as far as resources and like, where do you use this again?
Very
So,
good question.
Yeah,
So if you look at staff recommendation number 3, it actually says to direct staff to engage in the following near-term activities. So you're actually directing us to actually do the staff to do these 4 things, or 4 things, you have A, B, C, and D. That would be staff resources. Anything in addition to that, we would be coming back to the board to let you know about. And if you want additional information, it usually comes through as a OWP, overall work program task.
Yeah.
And so we would, if you would want, we could highlight it further.
so RABA is already doing the 99X, which is basically taking by bus from Reading to Chico, then you can pick up the train in, right? You
No,
can
pick up another bus.
another bus in Chico to take you to Sacramento.
Yes.
So I know that there's some issue with, not issue, but possible, like if we're taking people on a bus to Sacramento, it means they're not flying out of Reading, they can fly out of Sacramento. And obviously, depending on where you're going, that's advantageous. So I'm just curious, like what funding source funds this bus ride to Sacramento?
Yeah, so that is
Coming out of our transportation?
That is, right now, we have not committed anything from
Okay.
even, the goal here, as mentioned, is to use non-regional transit funds. That is the focus here, okay? Working with John Ando, he's identified costs related to services based upon 2 trips or 4 routes. John Ando's also been calling, he might be able to answer a couple questions about where things are at today. But the next step for us, the way I see it, is working with RABA to talk with Amtrak, to JPA, and the other partners on what do those fund sources look like for operations. And so that is what we're looking at. We have RABA has a revenue guarantee for Reading to Chico. There are
Yeah,
conversations.
so we're not
with
paying, yeah,
them.
it's not coming out of our, yeah.
The other thing is we're also reconciling and getting confirmation from a letter we received in 2021 for operating funds that were originally allocated for this service if things were moved forward from Caltrans. That is state money that's already been set aside already in the past before for these types of services. So we're confirming that those funds are still available and those are things we're putting together. John Ando, I think you're on the call there. Do you have anything else to add to Board Member Audette's question about next steps and where you're at?
Good morning. Do you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. At this point, because we are changing operators, we are in the process of scheduling a meeting with the San Joaquin's Joint Powers Authority and Amtrak on revisions to the agreement. And as part of those discussions, we've given them pricing for the cost for us to extend to Sacramento. And we're just seeking direction from them on when would they like us to extend to Sacramento using our existing equipment. If they're willing to fund additional costs to get us to go down to Sacramento, then we would amend our MOU and our agreement with them to implement that action, which is allowable under the new contract that we have with MTM Transit. So we just started the preliminary discussions. However, the direction from this board will help accelerate those discussions and getting to a decision on our next steps.
And I'll add to with John's conversation is attached to the staff report to Hemi County Transportation Commission has provided a conditional letter related to funding with some, what they have is some congestion mitigation air quality funds because they have areas where they have non-attainment for air quality status. And they've committed some funds to this project for multiple years. Conditional letter, they still need to go to their board in May.
Which are regional funds.
Our regional funds from them, but the I-5 service would definitely help them in having an eligible use of the funds that they have.
So then the other thing is that if we agree to this, does this become an unmet need?
Okay, so I will get back into that later. Unmet needs are within this county.
Okay, so this doesn't count.
This is on
towards that.
TDA funds. So I will definitely bring that back up when we come to agenda item number 11, and so that newer board members, take note of that.
I would like to just also preface that this service, if it's extended from Chico to Sacramento, will not use any RABA dedicated funds or any funds that are allocated to Shasta County Transit. If we're going to do this service, it has to be funded with outside dollars, particularly from Amtrak, San Joaquin Joint Powers Authority, fares, Tehama County, and other funding resources that are able to be identified. So just so that everyone is aware.
Okay, I
Can you
think
move that to staff? Can you go next slide? Thank you.
you are back on course.
Thank you.
We have sidetracked you.
Yeah, well, we are back to the staff recommendations. I am taking note of the idea of salmon runner, a letter potentially, I think
Five
that.
X is what we're gonna go.
I think that if you want a letter sent to CARB with this report, that you should add an item onto the recommendations that says sending the letter to CARB and acknowledging that diesel vehicles can make the service happen now. You know, using the language that Board Member Caltrans said.
I would also like comment on Tanessa's comment to get rid of the name Salmon Runner. I'm opposed. I think we ought to keep Salmon Runner. I think it's a corridor. We have the Sacramento River that the salmon come up and go back down, and the Salmon Runner is paralleling the
I
Sacramento
don't
River.
disagree. It just seems like it
And-
causes undue stress for
Well,
everybody every time you say
It was CARB who was saying it needed to be all electric. We
Yes.
always pushed that it be a hybrid or a
Yeah.
diesel bus. So I think we want to keep our concept of what the Salmon Runner bus
I think the
was.
15 people that are gonna ride it should vote on it.
Yeah.
Staff is going, that's electeds for you.
Why was it so important to get rid of the salmon runner name?
Yeah.
What's the perspective?
And if you look, can you?
They're not stressed at all. It's just
What's the history?
That's the way.
And if you look at the, some of the emblems about it, it says emissions free, worry free. So there's some branding that was done with it. That wasn't.
I think we could rebrand a little bit, keep the name.
Salmon X.
Yeah.
I will, just so I want to go through the fact that too.
Jennifer continue with her report. 'Cause
Any transit service needs to have branding to make it go. It does not do well. When he talks about a one-seat ride, we have a connection between Reading and Humboldt or Eureka Arcata right now. But you have to go from RABA, you have to know what that is. Trinity Transit to Weaverville, Trinity Transit to Hayford or to Willow Creek, then Willow Creek to Eureka. That's not something that is easy for a rider to do. So if we want to increase above 15 people, we have to have branding to do that.
And Salmon Runner is a good brand.
And that's also been taking over, just so we're clear, the state has taken over San Joaquin's train, just renamed theirs to the Gold Runner. So they know, they like the term runner at the state level, and the other places have used it.
Running on
It's a
gas.
diesel
You
run.
say running on gas.
Hey, just the fact, Greg, that you're the branding expert already scares me. Like,
Well, after they mandate electric buses, the passengers are going to be running, so.
Yeah.
Pushing.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's to the chair to consider and the board to consider recommendations.
I will also have chairs, please make sure you ask about if there's any public comments on our items. So just as a reminder.
Okay, you ready to open it for public comments?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Excuse me, Chair Watkins.
Yes.
Excuse me. We do have someone on the call that does have their hand up. T. Hayes.
Oh. Okay, I think we'll entertain, if you're ready.
Yes, this is Terry Hayes and go ahead, Terry.
Hi, good morning. Terry Hayes with the San Joaquin Joint Powers Authority. I'm here this morning to express our strong support for the North State Interstate City Bus to Rail Plan. We've strongly advocated for the development of the intercity and thruway bus service along the I-5 corridor from Reading to Sacramento, and we're pleased to see that this route is being recognized as a priority in the plan. So as we mentioned earlier, we're currently partnering on service between Reading and Chico with RABA. And we look forward to continuing that support and strengthening the connections for the North State region.
Okay, I think that's good input, and we're glad to have somebody from the Joint Powers Association to weigh into our meeting. I think that's a first.
And then do we have anyone else? I think Jessica from Tehama County might also be on the call.
Yes.
Hi, can you hear me?
You're kind of light.
Hello, sorry, I'm hoping you can hear me well. This is Jessica Risky Gomez on behalf of TRAX and the Tehama County Transportation Commission. We want to support the North State Intercity Bus and Rail Plan. This plan aligns with our commitment to improving rural mobility and builds on past efforts like, unfortunately, the name of the San Juan, that's no longer popular, my apologies. To expand intercity connections along the I-5 corridor. We're especially encouraged by the near-term focus on funding and coordinating with partners like RABA, Glen Ride, and the San Joaquin Joint Powers Authority, which operates key passenger rail services across the state. These efforts lay the foundation for long-term rail access in the North State, and it's a vital investment in the future of our region's transportation network. And Tehama thanks SRTA staff for advancing this work, and we stand ready to collaborate and commit funding to bringing this plan to life. So we really appreciate you taking the lead on this effort.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anybody else online that has their hand up?
I don't see anyone.
I don't see anyone.
How about present in the room? Anybody like to comment in public comment here? Seeing none, we'll close the public comment. Continue on.
I have a question. So it looks like there's a number of near-term activities in that table that are not captured in those four. If we're approving the plan, we're approving all of those near-term activities, not just those listed in these four here.
You're approving them as part of the plan. You're adopting the plan. So the plan exists and it can provide direction for future efforts. We would be coming back to the board, or another entity would be going to their boards to possibly use this and say, this wasn't adopted by the SRTA board and is a recommendation, near-term recommendation moving forward, but we'd be coming back to you with any of this.
To give an example to your question on one of the items related to Reading, Eureka, Arcata service, Humboldt Transit or Trinity or RABA, if they're looking for improvements to the corridor that's along there, they may then tie to this plan and say, look, there's these things have been identified as part of our partnership, and they will use this as a jumping point for letter system, grant application, funding, for other things they may have identified as part of the North State Express. So this plan not only benefits SRTA, but it benefits all of our different partners, that they will be able to jump off of this for their items where they may fit more appropriately within it. I'd say what our strategy plan does is it really right sizes what our efforts are, as well as where our partners are, and helps, I think, clarify that to the board, to the public, and our different partners, our role and involvement versus where the others may fit.
Okay.
Chair, if I might, I got a couple comments.
Okay.
Thank you. On page 56 of the plan, I did not read every word of this, but I did get through some of it. At the bottom, underneath demographics and travel trends, the paragraph under the bullet point says at a very high level, residential population and employment jobs, in brackets, are typically strong indicators of potential travel markets and are a good initial basis for comparing the corridors and the hubs identified in this study. Let me acknowledge the hard work that was put into this. I really do appreciate that, by the way. I know it's your wheelhouse, not mine. You guys obviously have educated yourself to a PhD level in transportation. I don't want to offend. It's not my sensibilities you probably already picked up on that a little bit. So I want to clarify that I do appreciate all the hard work. So when we talk about, with that statement alone, I guess the question I would have to be, if it's one of the criteria that we're basing how much we're going to spend of taxpayer dollars running vehicles up and down, trying to get people to jobs, I'd be really curious if we looked into how many people actually commute from Reading to Sacramento and would ride a bus to go to work, because that's a long bus ride.
Yeah, that you're taking that bullet you said in and of itself, and that's not the way the plan was written. We're looking at hospitals, educational opportunities, family and friends, other reasons that people might be traveling. So we're not looking just at jobs, and by no means am I interested in having a bedroom community that's 2.5 hours away. I want Reading to grow and city of Shasta Lake and city.
Yeah. But we're taking that criteria as
It is
part of the
one
plan.
Sure. Criteria.
Okay.
And then it could be a connection. Sure. 1 second. Think about also Red Bluff to Reading. How many people might be moving between those two places?
Yeah.
Jobs. So, and we don't have a good connection right now between Red Bluff and Reading. That's something that we could address with this.
Yeah. I mean, my buddy works in Red Bluff, and he drives 22 minutes to work every morning in his highly efficient hybrid Honda, and he's not going to get on a bus.
That's not everybody, right? That some people might choose.
I think it's important that if we're going to use that as criteria, then we should know the numbers.
We
the actual
have done
numbers
that in the when to preempt this study, we actually did the business plan, and we had streetlight data, which is big data. It was from 2017 maybe. So it was prior to the pandemic and work from home, but all of that should now have pretty much gone away. So we don't have as much work from home. So we do have that information and the ridership, really strong ridership numbers in the business plan that was originally done.
I'll add to one thing about what you're talking about through there. That's part of what our data dashboard project is trying to also do. So when we do our travel model updates, we usually go through efforts to see what data is there. So that is something that was built into like that project. And so that's something we'll bring back because we have to understand for our region, we're having to forecast travel and what's all taking place.
Right.
Every area where our county connects to another county, you have to know how travel is going in between those areas. So don't traffic counts, for example.
Right.
And so that's one of those efforts we'll go through. And so I think we will get in the next year some additional data, continue to help give us a better picture of where things are at today.
But to Chair Watkins' comment about vehicle miles traveled, the push against people like me is to reduce my vehicle miles traveled. I love to drive. Windshield time is glorious and
Don't worry,
highly
when it goes to
favored.
vehicle miles traveled, we'll all be on a bus.
Well, that's what they'd like. But I mean, it seems that when we do this, we're working really hard and we're going against the live, work, and play in your 15-minute cities that they're trying to accomplish. So I'm just curious. I mean, my sensibilities are like, well, we want this. We just spent $49 million in Chair Watkins' city to create a space where they can go 100 yards and live. They don't have to leave their 100-yard circle. They're going to go to the grocery store. They're going to maybe get on a bus in front of and so I'm just conflicted. This is me. I'm not asking anybody else to be conflicted, by the way. But it seems like oftentimes when we do this stuff, it seems like this sector is doing this and this sector is doing this, and they're not actually on the same page. And I think that's for a reason, but I won't get into that conspiracy theory today. So on page 79, 3.4.3 funding summary, the program described above to provide a good framework for funding new intercity transit projects, but funding levels will depend on annual budget allocations. The amount of funding in the budget will hinge on the characteristics of the new administration and Congress. So like the High-Speed Rail Authority, which I believe, and I can make a pretty strong argument, I won't do it right now, but I can make a strong argument that all of this is because we've spent probably bumping up against $1 trillion if we actually knew on the High-Speed Rail Authority, which is what they really want to connect us to, because they've already spent billions and billions of dollars on this debacle of a high-speed rail down the Central California corridor. The reality is we don't have the funding in place. We're going to do all this planning, and I appreciate the planning, but the money's not there. And when my president mentioned the High-Speed Rail Authority, recently, and he is going to look into it. I think the waste, fraud, and abuse is going to come out, and we're going to find out that this is all for naught. So I think it's really important too. So my last comment, if you go to the very back page, I made the comment, so are we not learning anything from the High Speed Rail Authority? Because if you look at the costs of some of this, I don't know who in the room wants to afford that. Did you look at the numbers? Like it's, and these are estimates. This isn't even close, by the way. Because if you build this in 5 years, it's going to be double that number.
Well, it'll be obsolete in 5 years too.
Is that for the train or a train station?
This is so if you went through this on last page, just this the station in Red Bluff and Anderson and Los Molinos, it's the Chico to Reading, the bus
stations.
I'm assuming they're rail stations.
Or rail stations?
Capital costs. You know, it's because then the first unit cost, it's track improvements. So you can then assume that these are going to be rail stations.
That whole section is track.
Yeah,
Railroad.
and
So, but we are not doing that. Wouldn't Amtrak do that?
No, that would be stuff with state level
it
agents.
doesn't matter, Tanessa. It's taxpayer dollars. That's my
Amtrak is
unit.
not taxpayer dollars. What are you talking about?
Well, they're highly subsidized.
I agree, but my point is that
I
let's
lost
just
the
say
room apparently, but
No,
my
but take
point
two-
is, it
hold
doesn't
on,
matter
Mike,
who's paying
Mike,
for it. This is
Mike,
this
hold on
is
one second. Let me ask you a
unsustainable.
question for that.
Absolutely
Let me ask you a
unsustainable.
question for that. We are responsible for accepting a report, just so because that's what they do. This,
Report.
hold on, this is a planning agency. So if anything like that were to happen, I mean, it's obviously, there is no money for that. The state is working at a deficit. They have no money to do anything like that. So that, and you don't need a station for any of the things that we are voting on as far as a
I
plan
understand.
for bus stuff. So, I mean, you go to worst case scenario, 100%, but this doesn't get you to that. This just is a planning document to say, hey, if there is an opportunity because the market or for whatever, or there are no tax dollars for it, then what would we prioritize? If you were gonna have a connect people somewhere, where would you prioritize that? So this is right? So our priority is this. If some other entity wants to come and do that, now they have this document to say, oh, here's the numbers for the need for the 15 people or 300 people or whatever. We're not funding or approving the funding of a new Amtrak station in Chico because people want to get from here to Sacramento.
I think it's prudent. I think it would be prudent if you did the math, dollars spent, even estimated dollars spent per rider, what the taxpayer would have to foot the bill.
Well, that's a whole other
few
conversation.
people. It's a whole nother-
We agree on that 100%.
But if you,
But I'd like to make a motion to approve your, as staff recommended.
And I would second that motion if you would put the caveat in there that I want to send a letter to the regulatory commission, people that are making these regulations and mandates, that we send them this,
Yeah,
get all this work.
Yeah.
I think we've
I
already,
took note of that. So what I got out of that from board member Calstrom was to send a letter to CARB and other state and federal agencies related to the plan.
To let them know that they've done all this work, they've got this plan, this is, great ideas. I mean, they've done all this work and their regulations are going to make it obsolete.
And mine even reach out to work with you on some of the language with the chair before we send a letter within the next few weeks or something on that end. So.
Yeah, perfect. So I'll second the motion.
Just, please, I think we need to have a clear motion that it is the staff recommendations
Staff
here
recommend-
with the addition of.
I'd like to make a motion for staff recommendations plus a letter. As
Okay, with
presented.
board chair and Chris Telstrup, yes.
okay, so we have a
Sir.
first by Tanessa, a second by Kelstrom.
Hey, Greg, someone's talking.
Mr. Tejan, may I just ask a quick question about this proposed motion?
Sure.
Okay, in relation to the grants that are available for the capital buses, could you include potentially converting those to diesel hybrid buses for us to use as capital for the I-5 service?
Yeah, I think that's a conversation this board has had before. So yeah, I think that sits within common communications we've had before.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
With that.
So he's talking about his existing buses and making them hybrid?
So he's talking about the use of diesel hybrids, which is within certain, get into details, certain transit interstate rail capital funding can be used for diesel hybrids. Other funding has not been allowed to use it. So that has been a challenge when we're trying to go for the right types of funding is use right ones and eligibility and discussing this with state agencies that oversee the approval of these grant programs. So duly noted, that's part of a thing.
Yeah, so that's that $8.6 million that you have, basically, is what I'm asking about. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so any other board members have any clarification or questions?
Person.
Okay. Do we need a roll call vote on this? No. Okay. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none. Boy,
Better.
I'm a no.
okay, we have one no.
I'll be so mad if you don't oppose that. Jeez.
Yes. Okay, did you catch that all, Amy?
Vanessa's.
Yes, sir.
Better.
Sorry, Matt, she knocked you off voting.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Paula. You did a good job. And I was impressed with your answer there. We are moving on to item 9. And this is the appointed board member to SRTA's alternate representative to the California Association of Council of Governments on a 2-year term. We already have Vanessa Audit as our primary one. We brought this item before the board last time and Mr. Gallagher wasn't here. So we postponed making a decision whether we wanted to have Mr. Plummer or Mr. Gallagher, as they both were in the running. So Mr. Gallagher, you are here now.
And I'm going to make a motion that Mr. Plummer could be the. Yeah,
And is Mr. Plummer going to accept that?
I'll accept that.
I'll second that.
Okay,
Right,
So-
so the proverbial bus.
so we have a motion from Gallagher and a second by Vanessa Audette.
Like under the electric bus.
So you figured you want to do it.
You get some windshield time, Mike.
That's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah, so-
Well, you're missing out.
Like never again, never again like sticking up for Mike like that. I'm like the one guy that wants to burn the whole thing down, doesn't want to be on the board and get to go yell at people.
All right, we have a first and a second.
Okay.
And then endorse it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Gallagher? Was that an aye?
Aye,
Oh, okay.
I made the motion.
Okay, so we have an alternate now, and it's Matt Plummer. So thank you for accepting that, Matt.
Yeah, Chair, legal counsel has advised, given the time and as well as for the item related to public hearing, he has advised that we skip number 10 and go to number 11. In compliance with bound requirements to hold an item. Let me double check, is Jen available?
Okay, so it is 2 minutes after 9, and we say we wouldn't do item 11 till after 9 o'clock. So I think we're in compliance with that. So item 11 is to conduct a transit funding workshop for the unmet transit needs and a public hearing and designate the Reading Area Bus Authority as the Consolidated Transportation Service Agency.
Excellent.
So, Ms. Palmer, you're back.
Yes, I had to get the USB over to hopefully get this PowerPoint back up. Ron, if you're able to do that, please. We're gonna start off, we're gonna kind of go through this piecemeal and go through a few of these, and then we'll wrap it up. Ron, if you think I need to do anything on my side, let me know.
No, you should be good. Just give me 1 minute here.
Okay, thank you. It's agenda item 11. Can you go to the, if you can get to the first slide, please. Thank you. Great. So we're going to start off with the transit workshop. Again, this is for new members and it's a repeat for some of you that were here this time last year. So this is the funding that's available for the Shasta region. We're gonna look at that first column on the left. That's the FTA funding, Federal Transit Administration. Under the Transit Federal Administration, there's urban and rural funds that get apportioned. So it's not competitive funding. It gets apportioned to our region. The urban funding is 5307. That can be used for capital and operations, so buses and for paying the drivers. The 5339 is capital only, buses and bus facilities. The rural portion, 5311, is for rural areas. Those two designations, urban and rural, are not maybe what we think of because we think we're a pretty rural area. These are designations from the census, and we are an urban area. It's called the Reading Urbanized Area here, and it does not follow city boundaries. It's based on census blocks that have a certain density of population. And then from the density of population of housing and people, it incorporates adjacent other land use, such as industrial or commercial. So just to understand that, so we do have areas in the county that are considered urban, and we have areas in the 3 cities that are considered rural. So they do not follow city boundaries. The intercity service, 5311F, if you kind of follow that, F, it's a portion of the rural funds. It's a 15% set aside at the state level of the fund, all the 5311 that comes to the state, and that can be used for intercity bus service. So there's 15% that goes to California's 5311 funds, and anybody in California that serves a rural area that connects to a urban area can go for these funds. Luckily, and from the great work of past people at the staff at the county and now with RABA, we've been very consistent in getting those competitive funds, typically around 281,000 to run the 299X, formerly called Bernie Express. We also go for other competitive funds from the Federal Transit Administration. One of those is getting vehicles and volunteer driver mileage paid through the 5310 program, which is for elderly individuals and individuals with disabilities. That is also competitive. We're looking to have these fundings come out. Our current federal government is changing things, and we have not been able to get some of those fundings to our region. So the numbers that we're looking at now are past years because we haven't been able to see this current federal fiscal year numbers. Then we can move over, just kind of from that, you can see that the total that we tend to get is the 3.3 million. The next column over is state funding. This is not an updated slide. Do you guys on your slides have more under that column? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
So
I'll go through those. So this state funding is low carbon transit operations. The keyword there is operations. We always like it when we get funding for operations because it's not solely dedicated to buying vehicles. So we do tend to like to use that on operating. And earlier today in the consent calendar, you approved LC top funds for the Route 15X, which serves Airport Road, and it goes from downtown Airport Road, veterans facilities, and over to the airport. If you can, thank you. Then let's see. So now we're on I have the correct slide in front of me. So we have the SGR funds. Those are state of good repair. That is specifically capital funds to keep vehicles and facilities in a state of good repair. And both of those are apportioned to our region, so they are not competitive funds. The next two down are transit. TIRCP is Transit and Intercity Rail Capital Program. That is typically competitive. In the past, it has been competitive. That's why I have it listed a second time. And we have been awarded funds in 2018 under the competitive program. But last year, actually, they're called 23-24 funds. We have a 5-year formula funds. So these, again, are not competitive, of 18.9 million in TIRCP and 2.7 million in ZETCP. That's Zero Emission Transportation Capital Program. Capital has to be used on facilities, buses and facilities. So if you see that 25 million from those 5-year formula funds really bumped up what the state has provided. Prior to that, when it was just LC Top and SGR, it was around 795,000 of what the state contributed to transit in this region.
So you went from less than $1 million to a bunch of millions.
for this 5-year funding. Mhm. We're gonna keep moving through this because that's not really the intent of this staff report. I'm happy to discuss that, but I'm trying to move us forward.
Thank you for
Okay.
these.
Move
I've
forward.
been asking for these buckets.
Okay. So then now we're going to move to the third column, which is local. This is the Transportation Development Act, and that is really what we are focusing on here today. It's come up earlier in our conversation about bus to rail, and it came up with my colleague Jessica talking about the apportionment of local transportation funds, and you're going to see it all again in June. So this is an annual process that we go through. There's 2 pots of funds under the Transportation Development Act. The STA stands for Trade Transit Assistance, only allowed to be used for transit. The second one is the Local Transportation Fund. It's a much higher dollar amount. And you can see the list kind of that I've pushed to the right there of what's allowable under the Local Transportation Fund. There's TD Administration and Planning. That's efforts of this board and the agency. That's Transportation Development Act. Then we have a 2% bike and ped set aside, a 5% Coordinated Transportation Services Agency set aside. That goes to Dignity, Health, Connected Living. Then Article 4 of the Transportation Development Act, LTF, is for transit. So any needs that are not met with prior funding, we take from Article 4. Then lastly, there are other purposes. I'm going to just be vague on those other purposes for now. You've got the totals at the bottom, so you can see that TDA is a bulk of the money. So our local funds are a bulk of the money that is available for transit in the region. Can you go to the next slide, please? Thank you, Laurent, also. I just wanted to, because I called this to your attention, I did add it. You can see here the city boundaries are in that dashed black line. And you can see the pale yellow color. Cream is the urban area. So you can see where those funding sources are and kind of how those census designations relate to our area. Next slide, please. So with all those funding plots that we have, you will see SV 125 is not included here at this time. We will be correcting that, and you'll see a new updated chart of this at the June meeting. But what you'll see here is that the middle column in a lot of those, not the top column, is what RABA and Bernie Express's transportation development funding. So it is a large portion typically of our public transit funds. And then the federal funding is another large portion. Really what this one also shows is like the money that in the past, what RABA has versus what the CTSA has available to it. The 2 columns with the, if you're looking up here, the taller columns, red and blue, versus the green and purple columns. The taller column is what RABA has, and then the smaller columns are what the CTSA had. So that's what we were using this chart for, but it is a good representation of kind of the distribution of where funds come from. Next slide, please. So this is the Transportation Development Act that we're discussing, those 2 fund sources. The local transportation comes from 1/4 of 1 cent return of local sales tax to our region. And then the State Transit Assistance Fund comes from the sale of diesel fuel in the state. And then it gets a portion to our region based on our population and fare revenue of our transit system, RABA's fare revenue. So just to be clear, that I talked about Article 8 and being vague about those other purposes. Under Transportation Development Act, SRTA may use local transportation funds for non-transit purposes, such as streets and roads, if it can be determined that there are no unmet transit needs. So we're looking at unmet transit needs today. You cannot be used on streets and roads if there are unmet transit needs. And then we also we have to determine if those unmet transit needs are reasonable to meet. Unmet transit needs have to be within our region, Shasta County. Yes.
So the state transit assistance tax is only on diesel fuel?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that.
I think that there might have, that is correct. There was something that happened with SB 1 a few years ago that I think increased that, but it is just on diesel fuel. This came from the state's website. Next slide, please. So we're gonna, so to be able to use those funds, the LTF funds, on anything other than transit and bike and ped, we have to go through a annual transit needs assessment. If 100% of the 1/4 of 1 cent return of local sales tax got spent on transit, we would not be doing this process. So we do this transit needs process because we have spent money of the LTF funds on other things other than transit. So for what is the transit needs assessment? We look at the transit dependent populations and existing transit services. We're going to have today a public hearing about unmet transit needs. And then we'll have we already have a preliminary assessment of unmet needs. Next slide, please. I'd like you to go ahead and hold a public hearing to see if there's a member of the public that has any comment on unmet transit need.
We will open the public hearing. Do we have anybody queued up with a hand up?
No,
I
I'm
do
not
not.
actually.
Okay, is there anybody in this room that would like to address us? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing.
Thank you very much. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we're going to go through those different pieces of the transit needs assessment. Next slide. You'll see some repetitions here. Again, we have a description in the transit needs assessment of our providers. Those are RABA and Dignity Health Connected Living. We look at transit demand analysis. We have for the past few years been using the demand analysis that was done in the Shasta Coordinated Transportation Plan. Now, the next one, existing transit performance. You'll look at some slides. I'm going to tell you what community outreach was done besides the public hearing we just had. And then we'll look, again, analysis of some new services. What I wanted to call, can you go back, please? We have had unmet transit needs in the past. We have determined that we wanted to serve airport, road, and the veterans facilities. Beach bus in the past, this board, the staff came and said, we don't know if it's necessarily reasonable to meet. And this board said, we want beach bus. So we went ahead and did that. Shasta Connect, which was Sunday transit service. We did not have Sunday transit service in the past. We did identify that as an unmet transit need, and it came up. And then last year we had 44X going to Shingletown. Shingletown was not served by transit service, and we determined that it could be met in this round. So we have had unmet needs in the past. One that you should also recognize is evening service. We did not have service after 6 p.m. And so people that were working late at night in retail or others that might need to use the services did not necessarily have ways to go out. Next slide, please. So transit demand analysis, I've, kind of our region doesn't grow and change all that much. So I, for the past couple of years, am using what was done in the Shasta Coordinated Transportation Plan. If you think about red, oranges being kind of the highlighted colors you want to focus on, the column on the far right, we're doing really well at making certain that those in higher need are, see if we can make this go. It's not going to. A higher need are being met. So we're doing a pretty good job again. And then if you look on the map on the left, the oranges, reds, the yellow, light greens, we have found ways to address those. We are not going to the places that are very low rank, typically, such as Hat Creek, Bella Vista, French Gulch. The one that I would call attention to is the Shingletown, which we did bring in last year from a request from community members in Shingletown. Next slide, please. So here's RABA's performance. We really aren't looking right now at firebox ratio because of laws of the state that have been allow us to include federal funds as local funds. So we are hitting about 50% and greater for our farebox return because we are including federal funds in those. You can see the TDA subsidy per trip that would be of interest. We're at, for 23-24, our last audited year, we're at $7 about, I'm looking at the fourth column. That's the most recent audited years under 23-24. This is combined. So this is both the fixed route service and the demand response service. And we are looking at over this year, based on the Triennial performance audit, potentially looking at other ways to get away from farebox ratio and look at other ways to and look at RABA's performance so that we are able to cut services that are not performing and maybe improve services that have a higher demand.
Do you have any percentage or on the actual fares that people are dropping money into the thing, not the vouchers, not the, what is that? Do you have any idea?
I don't have it on me right
Okay.
now, but I can get it to you. I'll definitely email it to the board. Through a
Because I know when we were at the RABA meeting, it was like a $10 million budget, 500,000 was fares, out of 10 million, but that included all the vouchers and all the handouts and all the programs and everything in that fare box.
It does. So vouchers being like if, I think that if Stuff the Bus, I think during Veterans Day, people can contribute money to buy passes for veterans, and those are the vouchers. So somebody has contributed money for that bus ride, right? It might not be the
But
right.
there's other programs for the elderly and there's other programs for veterans and there's,
Yes.
and
And low income.
disenfranchised and the use rescue mission hands them out and they count all of those in their
Correct.
fare box, even though they're not actual.
It's not, the riders may not be paying money, but somebody has, a Good Samaritan, somebody has contributed money for that ride.
What I'm hearing you're saying is you're interested if it's available potentially as like cash fares versus other programs per se.
Yeah, basically. I mean, I'm just curious, and it's not, have to do a whole.
Yeah, it's something we can talk with RABA about.
It's in there.
I'm sure they have breakdown.
It's in their ACFR and
The amount
it goes
is
into.
the amount is 5% for last fiscal year.
But John, that's the 5% was fares, but that includes some of these vouchers and everything else, right?
No,
It's
that's
not-
pure. That's pure fares. Cash.
5% is cash fares or whatever. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes.
I'm going to go to the next slide. This is for the 299X performance. We're going to see some of these change next year because we do have 44X and we're probably going to be looking at other things. But for 23-24, we had Bernie Express 299X, and this is the information on that. I will say that 299X has been fully funded recently with the FTA 5311F. So in that regard, it's 100% fair box. So anything extra just takes down how much we have to request in FTA funds. Next slide, please.
Jen, may I be asked for next fiscal year? Will you be consolidating that under RABA? Because we're not going to break that route out separately anymore.
We can discuss that because of the changes of all the different services that RABA is instituting over the last year.
Okay, just letting you know, we're not going to break it out going forward. That was the last fiscal year. Okay.
Okay, thank you. So that'll be one system. So we won't be fixed route, demand response, express services. What he's saying right there is I will have one chart on that. That'll be the RABA system.
Can we go back to that real quickly?
Sure.
The fare box ratio on the 299X.
Can you go back a slide?
Maybe you
Oh, wait, here it is. Sorry.
commented on this, but I missed it. You have 100%, and then it goes down to 5.6%.
I think that's my fault. Sorry. It's because I've typed in 100% on those other ones. This 5.69 is the amount of cash that was actually contributed. And if we were to include federal funds in that, it's 100%.
Okay.
Yeah. So sorry. That's, when I was doing this, I was interested myself in what the fare box return was, cash return was, and got to this. I didn't then go back and type in 100 instead. The CTSA performance, which is operated by Dignity Health Connected Living. This is, we're showing that we've got about a 3.2% decrease in ridership so far over last year. I've got 3 years compared there. The gray line is this year, and it is going up. I hope to see it continue to go up. The really a good thing to understand about CTSA services is those are rural services. So the miles are higher and the cost is higher. When you've got longer trips, you're going to have higher costs. Next slide, please. Okay, so what community outreach has been done? We had a meeting with our Social Services Transportation Advisory Council on April 16th, 2025. And then we also published in the Record Searchlight on our website, and I believe also in the Intermountain News, a 30-day public notice of today's public hearing. In past years, we have done surveys. We decided not to do that this year. We can go into that more if you're interested. Next slide, please.
I'd be interested.
Okay. We decided not to do surveys this year, one, because they're not required. And two, because we had just had finished our Shasta Coordinated Transportation Plan, that was one effort of pushing people to get us responses. We had the Bus to Rail survey, which was.
I was just curious if you guys just decide not to do them because they really don't help, because there's not enough responses.
No, we actually have gotten really good responses in the past, and it's what's brought about the very few unmet transit needs that we have brought into the system. Evening transit, Sunday transit, those are things that have come in the system. We just didn't want to overload them. This spring, which I would say is right now, so let's say late spring, RABA is going to be doing a customer satisfaction survey. And I didn't want to just keep asking the riders and members of the community to get back to us, because we were pushing out a lot of requests for information. We did ask that RABA include on their customer satisfaction survey a question that will help us with next year's transit need assessment about if there are any unmet needs. So we're meeting it early whenever that survey comes out. And if you see that, please share it broadly. So this is the same slide you've seen. I'm adding those last two lines. So as of the staff report writing, which was 10 days ago, we did not recommend any new transit needs. We've had quite a few transit changes with RABA taking on Sunday transit, doing evening service. They've got Uber rides, van pools. They're going to have a volunteer driver program maybe coming up.
And a trolley.
Okay, I think that's a. Well, I'm not going there. That is not part of this conversation. You are.
Sorry, I got excited again. Sorry.
Do not take.
It's not agendized. You don't have to.
Thank you. Keep moving. The one thing that is different, this is not an unmet transit need. I just want to, this by no means fits that, but I do want to call attention to the fact that we are asking to designate the Reading Area Bus Authority as the Consolidated Transportation Agency starting July 1, 2025. In the last board meeting in February, we provided a letter to this board that RABA had requested to be the CTSA. We are, as an agency, as staff of the agency, I'm happy to see that there's an agency that wants to actually be the CTSA. DHCL has been doing the operating services, but not the consolidation of services. So we're really excited to see that RABA wants to do that. And we're putting that in as a recommendation on this so that we can move forward in developing the Transportation Development Act budget, which will be coming to you in June. With that, we need that 5% set aside for the Consolidated Transportation Services Agency to show as going to RABA, not to SRTA. SRTA holding the funds for DHCL. Next slide, please. Okay, so, and then the last kind of part of the unmet transit needs and transit needs assessment is determinations. So I'm just going to read this out loud so everybody's aware that this is part of the public code. The fact that an identified transit need cannot be fully met based on available resources shall not be the sole reason for finding that a transit need is not reasonable to meet. An agency's determination of needs that are reasonable to meet shall not be made by comparing unmet transit needs with the needs of streets and roads. So those cannot, I mean, I'm trying to protect you guys. We would be recorded. Don't talk about it. It's not an option for you. Next slide, please. I bring it back to show you that we're not recommending any unmet transit needs. So that last slide doesn't really pertain to this. And we are still asking that the CTSA be RABA starting July 1. Next slide. This is the wrap up. These are the staff recommendations. We already conducted the public transit funding workshop. We already held the public hearing. Those last three are what I'm asking you to really, read through and make certain you're understanding what those are. Because we didn't have any unmet needs during the public hearing, nor have we had any that we're recommending, SSTAC is in agreement with us from our April 16th meeting. So we will be we will be drafting a letter with SSTAC that'll go in as Appendix 9 to the Transit Needs Assessment. And then on June 25th, our next board meeting, we'll be bringing our Transportation Development Act budget before the board for approval. That's it.
Very good. I think the most significant is number 5, where we're taking the Consolidated Transportation Service and taking it away from SRTA and giving that to RABA. That's a big change, and I think it's very wise and prudent to do. And I'm glad that RABA is willing to take it on.
And I will say that SRTA was holding the money. We're not allowed to be a CTSA, so we've just been holding the money for.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's great.
And with that too, I think what has been a hamper in past years, over the last decade and a half, as the Transportation Planning Agency, we've done studies to figure out how to find and identify someone that could be a CTSA with staffing responsibilities. I think things have been changed over the last couple of years. For example, RABA has a mobility manager. The part of their role is doing these coordination services, identifying the people that call in, which are the appropriate services that for them to take based on where they're located, their mobility and everything. So I think now we're set up as a region to be able to address that better and meet the requirements. And by doing this as well, the designation, I think it's going to help reduce a lot of our administrative side of things with having one entity just handling most of it and us being more of the overseer and administrator for the region side. So I think we'll see some great efficiencies on that end with that.
I'll make a motion to approve as recommended.
And I'll second the motion.
Okay, motion was made by Tanessa and seconded by Keltzer. Any other comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I'm an aye. I'm an aye.
Oh, my God.
I'm late to
It was
the party, but I'm an
unanimous.
aye.
Thank you, Laurent.
Okay, so to keep the county folks here, do we want to go on to 12 at this point?
I would go to 10.
Want to go back?
Go back to 10. Yeah.
Okay. It's receive a legislative update and consider taking positions or taking actions on specific legislation. Sean?
Thank you, Chair. Board members, you should have also a blue sheet. There is one edit on the staff report. I realized in recommendation number 1, there's a reference to Assembly Bill 239. That was inaccurate. It was Senate Bill 239. So we wanted to make sure that that was clear. So your recommendation action would be based upon the blue sheet that was provided. What I'd like to go is briefly go through each of the different essential positions that we're recommending, have conversations about those, and then move on to the next one, and then you can vote on everything at the end of where we're at. The first item in approval for a support position is House Resolution 1383 by Congressman Malfa, which is to support the reoperation of the Secure Rural Schools Act. The biggest point that we see there is that Secure Rural Schools Act was passed back in the early 2000s to support areas with significant amounts of federal lands. And it was able to provide funding for 3 specific things: rural roads, for maintenance of rural roads, rural schools, provide money to rural schools, and it's also some wildfire prevention funds. It's our understanding that the Secure Rural Schools Act, the final payments are being made as we know right now, and there aren't any more at the moment. The reauthorization of this bill, which has been around for a quarter of a decade, so 20, 25 years, would continue to provide funds for rural roads. And so that is why I'm recommending a position from this board related to support on that item. Related to.
So Sean, did you come up with what percent of Shasta County is federal lands?
Yes, sir. We have roughly 31% of lands within Shasta County are federal lands, or 249,000 acres. If I have it roughly correct. For what the impact is in our region. So 1/3.
Yeah, this was originally passed because in 92, when they did the Spot Owl decision and they stopped selling off swaths of forest land to be logged, back prior to 92, the stump fees from those timber sales funded most of the rural schools in the area in Siskiyou County.
So when they were selling timber from the Forest Service, 25% of the sales came back for roads and schools.
Correct.
And so this is trying to get federal funds to make up for that because 31% of the land around here are not taxed.
The only federal agency that ran in the black that actually made a profit was the U.S. Forest Service prior to 92.
Yeah, and I am proud to be a member that helped make that in the black before I retired, and then they went downhill.
And now the forests are black because they burned because we haven't logged them for 30 years.
The roads stuck and the schools need rebuilding. So let's just be honest about the whole picture.
So Sean, the question really is this going to get any traction at Congress?
I would hope so. It would seem that there's a lot of rural schools. Congressman Malfa, not only him, but it looks like at least over 6 different members in Congress that have supported the bill. We will wait to see. But I think the more letters that the congressman can receive, and including in there specifically at our end, I want to make sure we get this to the House Committee on Agriculture as well as the House Committee on Natural Resources to show support for that. I think that's an important aspect.
Can we go back? Can we add logging federal lands again?
Slow down, Sparky.
I would say that is outside our purview as the planning.
Log it, graze it, or watch it burn. I mean, we burn millions of acres now, not 10,000 when I was a kid, when we'd watch in July, the small plume of smoke would go up in the foothills and it was out tomorrow, it's burned itself out. So why can we add in our letter that we should absolutely go back to logging federal land?
I guess that's up to the board to decide.
They did recently sign an executive order.
It'd be a real distraction from what actually this is.
Right.
I mean,
And
I
they are
agree with you. I just don't think it's appropriate in this.
There is talk about that, Mike, on the federal level right
Yeah.
now, so they probably will do that. So do you need a separate motion for this letter or you want them all together?
No, we're just gonna go all through it.
Okay.
I'll go through each one. Let's see if we have any conversation.
So, Sean, you're sending this, you said to LaMalfa, to Department of Agriculture and to Department of Interior?
Committee on Natural Resources. The reason we're sending it to the committees is because that's where this bill is currently being held for hearings and conversation. If they move out of these, it will continue to go through various other departments and committees.
Because if you look at the federal lands, the Forest Service lands are under Department of Agriculture, the BLM lands are in Department of Interior, and there's talk about combining that into Department of Government Lands, which would be a whole new under Department of Interior, not under Agriculture. And they're talking about taking the 9 Forest Service regions in the nation and bringing those down to just 3 regions, which is going to be a huge change for the Forest Service and probably for the good.
Yes.
So anyway, so I think it ought to go to Interior also.
Well, once it gets there, I think it's only stuck.
It's in committee right now.
In committee, so we want to, but can we approve that if it comes to another committee, we already approve another letter going?
Yes, you can.
At whatever phase it's in that you send letters?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Okay.
In perpetuity?
Okay. I'll next go to Senate Bill 239 by region. This is a bill proposed this current 2-year state legislative cycle. It is similar to Assembly Bill 817 that this board supported last year, related revisions for advisory bodies with revisions to the Brown Act, so that way they can participate remotely without having to post their home location and other requirements that are there that really are kind of, potentially impede participation. For us, for example, our Social Services Technical Advisory Committee is made up of a number of individuals representing individuals with disabilities, seniors, and other groups. Some of them are providers. Some of them are members of the public and are people to represent these. It could deter people wanting to participate. We also have challenges depending on when the advisory body needs to meet. Winter weather, some of these people live in other more remote areas. Participate remotely is easy. So this is just really to piggyback off of prior efforts we supported. This is the current version of that bill for that provision. So just that's what that was about. The next one is Senate Bill 71. Currently, there are a series of activities that are already exempt under the California Environmental Quality Act for projects. Nope, don't need the slide yet. That'll be in a minute. Thank you. Related to exemptions, so that way it streamlines the process, makes it so we don't have to go through the environmental process for a number of transportation, active transportation, and transit projects. It was proposed 3 years ago. The state had done these exemptions under CEQA to streamline the process. A bill is introduced, says, hey, these benefit us, they're more efficient. That makes sure that these projects cost less, especially on transit, and other projects related to your cities and counties, doing intersection timing improvements and other things. It says, hey, it's a project exempt. So this is a support letter for that to make those exemptions indefinite. Those are the 3 support bills. Any other questions on those before we go forward?
Anybody have any comments or questions?
I have
Mike?
a hell no on Wiener's letter. That guy's not right. And the note I wrote, it's so we can build a bike path and kill fairy shrimp, but we can't build homes. We can't, he's going to exempt CEQA on active transportation. So we can do bike and pet, but we can't make an exemption for somebody that wants to build homes that we desperately need in Anderson. And we got to mitigate the bats and all the other stuff. But by golly, if we're going to build a bike path, let's just ram it through. So I'm a pass on that one for sure. And I despise the person who wrote it. I'll just say that publicly. Everything that guy has tried to pass has just totally ripped local control for housing and all that stuff. He is just constantly barraging our small little cities with overreach. And so I'm gonna pass on that one. No.
So I
Hard
would,
pass.
Context, is this related to, at our last sort of conference that we had, they were talking about some of the modifications or mitigations are costing double what the projects cost. So there was like one highway project down in Southern California, and it was a $500 million project, but the mitigations were $1 billion. So it made it $1.5 billion. And so I was assuming that this bill, even though it's by our good friend Weiner, that this bill was sort of to help with that, because basically these projects are becoming so infeasible that even if it's a project that they want and it follows all the things that they're guidelining, they can't afford it because of the mitigations are just, they're double the
They'll make
cost.
the
of
private
it.
sector mitigate it all day and spend the billion. So no,
so
it's turned out it's fair play. That's my stance. That's my rebuttal would be, if you're gonna do that to the private developer who's trying to make a buck and provide infrastructure and all the other stuff that private does, then no, you don't get a pass. You don't get a pass. Like,
Well, it is tax dollars, so it is still your money. So it would limit
Don't
how
build
much
the bike
tax
path.
dollars are.
Don't build
No,
it.
I understand that you're looking at the bike part, but I'm looking at the highway part on the second
like
part
on
of that.
traffic signaling, timing is another example.
Yeah, I
So,
think,
well, that's why they lump all that together. They can't break it out. They just lump it all together. So I have to say no to the big picture. I'm saying no to the big picture.
Okay.
Personally, that's just my stance. So
Okay, on the small picture, Mike, what they're doing here is they're saying CEQA is probably broken.
yes.
And this is a little fix, and they need to realize that CEQA is totally broken on all the other areas you're mentioning.
No, but
And,
yeah.
and this is a start.
Are they saying it like that, or is that just our interpretation?
Well, they're
There's a number of-
acknowledging that it's broken here, and I would say it's broken in many other areas,
I
and
think,
this is a start.
if I may, I think it's fairly recognized that CEQA is broken.
Yeah.
And the states, there's big pushback. They've talked about, hey, let's amend CEQA. That goes nowhere. So what the state does, they just exempt the projects they like CEQA, which is acknowledgement CEQA is broken.
Yeah, and what the state likes, I tend to oppose. So this is just me. I'm just a one-off. So I'm just stating my personal case. And that's the problem with the state of California is instead of fixing the broken part, we just kick cans down roads and say, oh, I'll do this because my pet project and I'm getting a kickback and I'll make legislation that's horrible legislation. And this is what we do in California. And so I'm just standing up and saying, no, it's hard to pass on here.
And that's, so I think what we'll do is we'll go through each item for votes, just for that to, and everything. The thing I would say on the transit side, for example, my understanding, a number of the different exemptions that already exist right now that would continue, for example, is if RABA then makes a change to a route, says it's under CEQA, it may have to go through an ER review process potentially, which they don't have to do right now. Implementing a microtransit service and making changes. I mean, that RABA then has to declare it as a project because it is under the California Environmental Quality Act, but then they have to do an environmental review related to that project and don't have those services exempt. From that project. The same thing would be for the demand response service, the paratransit service. You change the service area, you change service time, that has to go through a review. So from that perspective, I think what is being looked at is says, look, I think it's being recognized, as is mentioned, CEQA is broken on a number of there's a number of these other types of activities that are identified under CEQA as a project, but they look at it and say, we should not have CEQA getting in the way of addressing all these other needs and having to make the process more expensive and take longer on that end. I agree, there's a lot of other bills. This one is focused specifically on these items. For what they're highlighting in this bill, there's probably lots of other bills that we presented over time. This is one I'm presenting for there.
So, Sean, could we add another paragraph or so and say, this is a good start, but you just barely scratch the problems of CEQA and you need to take this further?
Well, the reality is there's a lot of other bills going through the legislature and in recent years that have taken, little pieces out of CEQA. And I think, while I agree with your overall argument about the problems with CEQA, my perspective is if we can streamline anything, that's a win and a step in the right direction. So, and it's a further gutting of CEQA to make it more balanced. So I think it's, a step in the right direction. It's not a perfect step.
If the board was to approve, still submit a letter, yes, we could add some additional language, but there's no greater fixes needed to CEQA to really fix the process to make it more efficient, to really back off a lot of the different departments.
I think that would be a good addition to the letter.
So if that's something, we'll go through that and do votes. So that could be something.
So if we're gonna do these separately, I'd like to make the motion to approve the Loma Alpha bill, second and support Loma Alpha bill. Kevin Price seconded.
Okay, so did you catch that, Amy? On just the Lamalfa letter?
Yes.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously.
You guys can have the other key.
You want to do SB 239 in real quick?
Yeah.
We talked about it.
I'll make a motion to pass.
And I'll second.
Okay, it was, Vanessa seconded,
Vanessa made the
SB
motion.
239 and Kellstrom seconded it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none. So now we're down to SB 71. I would recommend that we add another paragraph saying this is a start, but they ought to recognize there's still a great problem. Just historically, when they passed NEPA, right at the beginning, they exempted all the impact of pollution from the space shuttle and all the launchers. Those were exempt, but somebody could oppose a 10-acre Forest Service timber sale under NEPA for 29 cents for the price of a stamp. But all the space shuttle and all Cape Canaveral was exempt. Nobody could challenge that. So they started that in NEPA, and CEQA just needs to keep going on finding exemptions that cannot be challenged.
I think I'm with Mike on this one. I can't support anything from Anthony Weiner, so I don't care. I don't care how good the bill is. I don't care how much sense it makes. When it comes to that guy, and I'm opposed, so.
You gonna make it?
Yeah, let's have a motion.
I'll second.
Wait, who made the motion?
You.
Oh,
I'm
I made
saying-
the motion?
Well, you said it. so-
Okay, okay.
And you're adding it to the letter. so-
And we're adding another paragraph to the letter. So then let's do a roll call vote on this one, Amy.
All right. We'll do a roll call vote on this. Board Member Audit.
Yes.
That was a yes.
Okay. Board Member Cry.
Hard no.
Board Member Gallagher.
Nope.
Board Member Kellstrom.
No.
Board Member Plummer.
Yes.
Board Member Lata.
Yes.
And Chair Watkins.
I think it's a tie vote. I'm going to go yes.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
That's how it works.
Yeah, passes.
And I'm unoffended. Believe that about an election today.
I will work with you, Chair, on the additional language back to that. I'll resubmit.
Chair Watkins, can you clarify who was the second on that?
Me.
The second was Vanessa. I made the motion and Vanessa seconded it.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, so are we going to item 12 or?
So no, so we're gonna go to number 2 on recommendations. Assembly Bill 1244. It is included in the staff report by Assemblymember Wicks. Proposes a number of things under CEQA related to transportation impact mitigation and affordable housing, or what they call transit-oriented development implementation program. Specifically, the bill allows under CEQA developers to meet vehicle miles traveled mitigation requirements, which is required under Senate Bill 743 for land use developments by potentially contributing fees to what they're calling a transit-oriented development implementation program. That program will be overseen by the state's Department of Housing and Community Development. And fees collected will be used to support transit-friendly housing projects in the same region in which the fees are collected. First to the city, then to the county. The bill also in its current form has essentially suggested a statewide flat fee for VMT mitigation to be applied. It is currently blank in the bill. It doesn't have anything that specifies anything else. In talking with members from CalCOG, our association, national or statewide association, there's a number of challenges and problems here. One, it ignores challenges of rural regions in the inefficient application of Senate Bill 743 and BMT mitigation fees. That it continues to be a challenge and there needs to be fixes. Some would argue to remove it in its application of rural areas and definitely change definitions. The definitions used in the current bill primarily fit urban definitions. They don't include rural definitions. That is problematic because some of the definitions that they use, we would sit and go, how would a city or county in a rural region even apply that? It also does not provide guidance on what types of projects HCD would choose. It also does not guarantee necessarily that the fees, if they were collected in your jurisdiction, stay there. For example, if the city of Reading would have mitigation fees collected under this bill, HCD would receive those funds and first can coordinate with the city on potentially using those. But HCD could also turn, oh, there's a project in Anderson or a project in the county and a corporate area that we want to do it towards. And so we're going to move those fees. My opinion is that fees collected in a jurisdiction should stay within that jurisdiction. And I don't think any jurisdiction here would want their fees collected going to another jurisdiction. So I think that is problematic. The bill is currently has had some analysis done. We are still in discussions with CalCOG's legislative folks and other partners on this. I would recommend that the board take a watch position for staff, but take an opposed position on the bill as it currently is. And if it moves forwards to hearings, then I would work with the chair and our other partners on submitting a letter and then would provide that for a board notice at a future date. That's all I have on the bill right now. So I just want to make sure if there's any questions, I'll try my best to answer. But that's where we're recommending is take a watch but opposed position and allow me to write a letter to the chair if needed.
I'll make a motion.
Sorry, go ahead.
Do we need a motion or is just direction that we concur with your analysis?
I would say the best thing is that you concur and I would take a vote on it because that will give me the ability to be able to write it on behalf of the board.
I will second Plummer's motion.
Okay, first by Matt Plummer, second by Kellstrom. To take what the recommendations of what Sean just presented. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously.
Okay, thank you. Laurent, can you put the map up, please, real quick? So Assembly Bill 902 by Schultz. At Fiscal and Policy meeting, we talked about this bill. It significantly changed. And so I pulled a bunch of stuff out and wanted to give an update on what this bill does. The bill was amended just prior to this board meeting, requiring a lead agency after January 1 of 2026 to take various actions to mitigate impacts of transportation infrastructure that may impact wildlife in what are called connectivity areas and allow the use of mitigation credits if approved by the Department of Fish and Wildlife. Up on this map here, so we had to do some research to figure out what exactly this meant and how it applies. On the left is just a statewide map prepared by Department of Fish and Wildlife in 2022. On the right is just a zoomed in version where you can see essentially in Shasta County, we have no red zones, no connectivity areas. Fish and Wildlife is tasked in the state with identifying across California wildlife activity and migration areas that may be negatively impacted by infrastructure such as roads, railways, and canals. Wildlife connectivity areas are land and waterways around these identified infrastructure where the state has identified a priority to connect habitats to identified species. Those are those red markings that you can see on the map. So far, we have these areas would connect different types of species of animals, such as deer, elk, mountain lions, certain specific salamanders, etc. Those are identified in the report. Other projects, Caltrans is required to partner with Fish and Wildlife to work towards reducing impacts of certain portions of our state highway system that exist in these connectivity areas. Other projects, however, by another lead agency that would happen to happen in those areas would be also subject to any mitigation, including potentially utilizing mitigation credits. Lead agencies are typically cities, counties, Caltrans, the railroad, etc. The problem with the current bill, though, proposes suggests still, the original bill had a bunch of requirements put on metropolitan planning organizations and regional transportation planning agencies through our regional transportation plan. That threw up a bunch of red flags because it was going to affect every county across the state. And essentially they were saying the regional agency, because these projects are listed in a plan, they may have a role to actually remediate these projects. No, we don't. We don't have authority. We don't build these projects. It's a planning effort. That was significantly changed, and a lot of the language was changed to lead agency. However, there is still language in the bill that says that it's the legislature's intent that MPOs and regional transportation agencies implement measures to remediate barriers to wildlife connectivity within their regions without providing clear direction on how to do so and how does it actually tie to our role. With that, I'm continuing to have conversations with CalCOG's legislative team and others. I would recommend that the board take an oppose unless amended position and allow staff to watch and coordinate reviewing the bill with other partners, and if needed, then prepare and submit a letter. If we provide a letter, we would then show it to the board at a future time. That's the best that I have right now for you on this bill. To get your thoughts on moving forward on any position.
How could it be amended in such a way that we would not oppose?
So one of the things that I looked at was, and that's why I want to talk with the legislative staff with CalCOG, these things. One of the things that I look at is, essentially asking them to recognize or remove the requirement that MPOs and RTPAs must implement measures to remediate barriers. Implement what measures? What are actually even appropriate? When you're talking about remediating, we don't have that authority. We don't have that project authority. And any authority that we did have would come through a funding program that we receive that says, this is the fund source in the grant program, whether it's competitive or formulaic. Here's the requirements. We review projects that are submitted for those, and as long as they meet those requirements, we're done. If a project doesn't meet the requirements, then we ask those projects to be revised if they want to consider funding. So we already have processes in place with the grant funds that are available. When I look at this one, it's very broad. So that's what I would look at with trying to identify additional language for opposing unless amended. If the MPO RTPA connection is removed, then I have no opinion at this point related to from my perspective, from what our role is at the agency. And that's separate from how a city or county staff.
So if it doesn't include that, we're just gonna not say anything, but if they do try to put that on you, we're gonna
Yes.
oppose it unless they take that out, and then we'll just leave it.
We could have just opposed it either way, even though it's less relevant to us.
You could.
I think I would be in
I would
favor
be
of just
fine, I would be
opposing.
fine with that.
Yeah, so I'll make a motion to oppose.
I'll second.
No.
Okay, moved by Plummer and seconded by Adet.
Oh, okay. Take it.
To write an oppose on Assembly Bill 902.
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimous.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we are going to. Are we going to 12?
Yes, we'll go to 12 now. Division 2, cycle 3.
Laurent, would you mind running my slideshow for me?
Yeah, give me
Thank you, Chair Watkins. And members. While this is coming up, I'd just like to say this staff report represents the culmination of a long multi-year effort. And so I'm very happy and very proud to have this before you today. And I kind of sprung this on Laurent. Originally, I was going to run it, then I saw the issues we're having with the computer. Next slide, please. With that, back one, please. The logo. Thank you. With us today is our consultant, Todd Tregenza at GHD. He's on hand to answer any technical questions about this effort. Also, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank our partner on this effort, Caltrans, particularly Aaron Cassis and Natalie Kinney, who were the project managers on the Caltrans side. Couldn't have done it without your help. Appreciate it. I'd also like to thank Reading Rancheria for participating with this effort. And I'd like to thank the Shasta County, City of Anderson, City of Reading, and anybody else that's participated, providing feedback or just collaborating with us on this effort. Next slide.
So I just wanted to bring up the corridor vision. I presented this last time, but I kind of wanted to remind you, this is the vision that the plan embodies. And it's kind of long, so I'll just share the bold part with you. The State Route 273 corridor vision aims to achieve a safe, efficient, and reliable transportation for the movement of goods and people. This vision seeks to maximize the accessibility, resiliency, and connectedness of this corridor for all users. Next slide. So last time I was up here in February, I had the draft plan here before you, and it had just been published on the project website, envision273.org. And we proceeded with public outreach to get some feedback about the draft plan. We solicited board feedback twice via email in addition to the board meeting. And the public feedback was solicited on the website through an open-ended form from February 21st through March 24th. There were multiple stories on local media to increase awareness, and we had public workshops in Reading on March 10th and Anderson on March 11th, noon and evening. And I just want to take this opportunity to thank my colleague, Laurent, who's running the meeting. I was deathly ill that week, and so Laurent really stepped up and he saved me on that. So thank you, Laurent. And of course, we had the usual social media posts about the workshops. Next slide. And actually skip this slide. This is a duplicate. So at the workshops, from what I've been told, because I wasn't there, there was a priority ranking exercise where there was a list of projects and we asked attendees to prioritize projects. And so these were the top scoring projects. There was a tie for third place. The number one item on the priority list was pedestrian lighting between Buenaventura Boulevard and Anderson, improvements at the Cypress Avenue intersection. And then tied for third would be a gateway project between Cypress and Buenaventura, and a class 1 bike path between Buenaventura and Bonneview. Next slide. As far as the online feedback goes, we got 18 comments. It was an open-ended forum, so people often address multiple items. This is kind of a brief summary of what we got. We had 2 comments supporting more shade trees, 2 comments supporting additional lighting. We had comments about closing West Side at Breslau. There were 2 people for it, or I'm sorry, 2 people against it, 1 person for it. We had 1 comment requesting more bike lanes, 1 comment requesting a median all the way down the middle, which I think they meant a median barrier. 3 comments expressing concern about the existing southbound lane reduction under the railroad. 1 comment requesting the route be renamed Historic Highway 99. It's already co-signed that way, though. And then there were 5 comments about items beyond the purview of this agency. Next slide. And I'd like to just kind of recap about the overall engagement on this effort over the years that it's been operating. So under attachment C, there is a summary of all of the public engagement that's happened throughout the process. But here's one of the highlights here. We did a postcard mailing to every address within a half mile of the corridor. And we sent it out twice. There was a misprint on 1 copy. So it had the right address, but the QR code didn't work. And then we got a corrected one out. And that additional mailing was no charge to the agency. So all in all, that represents over 20,000 addresses. And the postcard directed people to the project website and a survey on the website. And so out of those 20,000 addresses, we received a little over 1,300 responses over close to a year. So the survey was designed to collect information on how people use and would like to use the corridor. Next slide. The project website saw over 4,300 visits, over 2,200 unique visitors, 163 comments total, and 123 document downloads of like the plan and supporting documents on the website. The key methods of outreach on the website were the survey I just discussed, an interactive online mapping tool where you could drop a pin and make a comment on a particular location, and an idea wall where people could put something up and vote it up or down and say, hey, this is cool. I saw this somewhere. Why don't you try this? Next slide. So on the idea wall, we got 43 comments from 28 stakeholders. The highest voted comment was what was called a star path. which was, as far as I could tell, a glow-in-the-dark treatment on a bike lane, is something that's being piloted in Cambridge, England, but I haven't seen anything in the US about it. There's also the second highest voted thing was, again, more landscaping, trees and shade, and general beautification. Also on there was replacing signals with roundabouts, more lighting and beautification, a bike lane the entire length of the corridor, and traffic light synchronization because they felt traffic was too much stop and go because of the signals. On the mapping tool, we received 163 pin drops from 89 stakeholders. Themes were all over the place. I've highlighted themes here. Multimodal transportation, rail, funding and programs, placemaking, roadway, like pavement condition, that kind of thing, traffic calming, traffic control, signals again, and transit. The top 3 voted comments were a pedestrian bridge over the railroad in 273 near Westwood Village, connecting the east side to the shopping center. There's a lot of homes over there that otherwise don't really have an easy way to get there other than by car. There was a comment that the railroad undercrossing is dangerous and they'd like it widened so a separate bike lane can be accommodated. And a request to reopen the left-bound turn from Brandstetter onto northbound 273. So, merge ahead. We took and we merged all those comments into our planning process. And while we're working on the planning process, we also took the opportunity to kind of merge efforts with existing Caltrans efforts. Next slide. So one of the things that we kind of came together on was what's called the Downtown Reading CAP-M. And that's a capital maintenance project. And these things have kind of a rigorous schedule and they need to happen on that schedule, whether or not. So we couldn't really postpone it until the plan was through. So we provided input and collaborated on it. So basically what this project is going to do is it's pavement maintenance, essentially an overlay from Buenaventura Boulevard North through downtown Reading all the way up to where it hits I-5. And as part of that, they're going to replace 25 old traffic signals, reconstruct 96 curb ramps, and install 10 new curb ramps. There's also going to be various new complete streets elements and other improvements. Basically, you're not going to see any major reconstruction on these types of projects. It's typically just new pavement and paint, but they were able to kind of work a little bit in with those curb ramps and stuff. So last I heard that this is an estimate of 63 million, and that comes out of a fund called SHOP, State Highway Operation and Protection Program. And construction is supposed to start in 2028, last I heard. Next slide. Also on that is Brighter 273, a safety project. This will install a concrete median barrier from Buenaventura to Canyon Road, which is down by the Rancheria. It installs median lighting from Buenaventura to South Street in Anderson. And this is coming out of the safety improvement funds. And this represents a cost of about 53 million. Construction starts in 2020.
Those are state funds?
Yep.
Caltrans?
Well, regional funds, right? Or state. Okay. Yeah, feel free to correct me at any point if I'm off. So, also, Caltrans is doing what's called a shop minor project. 2 of them, where they're going to improve the lighting at the railroad undercrossing, aka the mouse hole. It's got to be 2 phases because of various funding issues and restrictions and all that. So first phase is going to do the northern part in 2026. Second phase, the southern part in 2027. So project prioritization for the plan. Safety matters. All of the candidate projects that were proposed were evaluated using the same metrics that we used to evaluate the corridor at the beginning of the process. How are we going to move the needle on this? And those criteria were safety, operations and reliability, mobility and connectivity, sustainability and resiliency, and equity. And so based on the existing conditions, the public feedback that we've received throughout the project, and partner consensus, it was decided to weight safety higher than the other metrics when evaluating the projects. So we have here a partial list of the prioritized projects in the plan. So they were divided into three planning and construction horizons. Short term is in the next 5 years. Midterm is the following 10 years, and long term is beyond that. So I've included, even though they're not really, they're kind of collaborative efforts, I've included the downtown Reading cap and the Brighter 273 and the minor projects I just talked about there. That's all short term. We'd like to do a railroad crossing study, and I'll talk about that more here in a minute. Additional planning for gateway corridors, and continuing to examine the possibility of reverting a portion of downtown Reading to two-way traffic. In the midterm, we're calling for a corridor-wide separated bikeway network, signalization and crossing improvements, improved lighting. Long-term, construction of the gateway corridors, roundabout conversions in certain locations, and construction of the downtown Reading reversion, should that go forward. So what does all that mean? I've color-coded everything on here, and I've got a little timeline at the bottom. Basically, the gateway corridors are a way to enhance the gateways into downtown Reading, make them operate better for everyone, increase the beautification, do the shade trees that were so highly suggested, that kind of thing. And one of the things we talked about was improvements to the Cypress intersection. We're not quite sure what that's going to look like, whether that would be an installation of a roundabout there or just simplifying the existing intersection, which is currently kind of built like a freeway still. And an improved connection between South City Park and Laxton View neighborhood. And that's the neighborhood up on the bluff there. And there's a city easement where something might be able to be constructed. Also,
Michael, I'm sorry to interrupt, but is that where the weird angled streets come in? Is that what?
Yeah, so because all of that used to be state highway, right? Cypress Avenue once upon a time was Highway 44.
Okay.
Before the current one was built, right? And so I've got a slide from an old presentation where it was taken in 59, and it's basically the same configuration.
And just south where the comes out of that neighborhood at an angle, and then you can cut in behind the old dairy, and yeah, got it. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure my brain was in the right general area.
I remember maybe it was in February where you shared where the accidents and both pedestrian and car accidents were. And if I remember correctly, which might be not correct because that was a while ago, but it wasn't at these corridors, was it? It was more kind of near Breslau.
Off the top of my head, I can't speak to that. We do have the system profiles in the appendix.
There were some collisions at those intersections at Cypress, immediately kind of north of it and in the area, but they're not the hottest spots along the corridor.
That's further south, isn't it?
Further south, yeah.
And what's important to consider is sometimes the statistics alone don't tell the whole story. There may be low collision at a particular intersection because people are too scared to even try it, right? And they just don't go. So that's something to consider in the overall evaluation. So,
and I'll also say that the benefit cost assessments in Chapter 9 at the back end really highlight, and actually in Chapter 8, they highlight where those collision hotspots are, because those have the highest safety benefit. And so that's a good way to kind of get a sense of where those anticipated benefits are greatest. These have other potential benefits to them, including safety, but they're not the highest safety priorities, I would say.
But one thing that's worth pointing out is that both of these, this section and the North Market Street section, what old timers like me call the Miracle Mile, these are both called out in the City of Reading's general plan for improvements too. So that aligns nicely there.
Might be getting ahead of the presentation a little bit, but of those projects on that chart where you have the short-term, mid-term, and long-term, which of those most prioritize the hot spots where we have accidents? Because my understanding is that was kind of the impetus for this, is that we had the highest number of fatalities in this area.
That's safety, right?
The lighting projects, all of the lighting projects have a tremendous safety benefit. A lot of your collisions occur at night. And so those are handled by the Brighter 273 project, as well as the Mousehole lighting project around Wyndham. The CAPM project itself has a number of safety elements in it, the downtown Reading CAPM. I would say that these studies are necessary in order to determine what the preferred projects are going to be in the southern and northern gateways. Beyond that, I would say the roundabouts, which are a long-term project, have a very high safety benefit. And those, but additionally require more, they can't be implemented in the next 5 to 10 years. That's why they're in the long-term horizon. They need additional study, they need environmental, they need to go through a process called, used to be called ICE, it's ISOP now, basically looking at what the highest return on investment is between a traffic signal and a roundabout. So I hope that, helps on something.
So, yeah, what you're finding is a lot of the projects in that short-term ban and Brighter 270 includes a lot of median improvements. So Caltrans looked at that to reduce the crossing collisions that they have as a problem in certain spots. So those short-term projects are addressing a lot of those immediate safety concerns. And yet those are kind of already in the works in early stages that Caltrans is working on that we'll see take place.
And so North Market Street is the other one, Quartz Hill to Benton. And again, that aligns with focus area in the city of Reading's general plan. And we're looking at possible roundabouts and a road diet there. There's a lot of excess capacity that promotes speeding. So next slide. One of the things that has come up in the community almost since it was implemented was reverting the one-way streets to two-way streets. Last time this was touched on outside of Envision 273, it was in the 2010s as part of the City of Reading downtown circulation. Fortunately, it was not within the scope of that, so they recommended it for further study. So we wanted to make sure that it was indeed studied. Turns out we crunched the numbers and it's not feasible for the section, including Tehama Street North, because you've got all the highways coming in, right? And a lot of traffic and mixing it up, but it is feasible below that. And so that has generally, those things have, it's of course going to require additional analysis and a lot of outreach with, the local businesses, but generally planners know that these types of projects tend to boost business, right? So, because if you're going on a one-way street, you're going there to work, you're not going on that street back, right? You're taking a different one back. So, some places that may have a business model more oriented to morning stuff, like a coffee shop, are probably going to struggle on that. Whereas if they were there on the other direction or both directions, it's just more flexible. So, and of course, there's also safety gains as well too. But should we go forward with that, it's going to require additional coordination and planning between City of Reading and Caltrans, more public engagement, and it wouldn't be practical. Another priority project is corridor-wide separated bikeway network. We're looking at planning on that either short or medium term, and then construction mid to long term. This aligns with a major concept in SRTA's Go Shasta Regional Active Transportation Plan, which is trunk lines. Think of them as bike highways, connections between regional destinations. So that plan, which was developed back around 2018, called for a active transportation connection between the city of Anderson and the city of Reading. And such a thing would probably be developed in phases, and it would provide a low stress connection for people of all ages and abilities, something we heard a lot from the public about. And it's expected to provide mobility, safety, and air quality benefits equal to over twice the cost. So one of the things that is going to be part of my recommendation here is a railroad crossing study, and this is our recommended next step. And this arose from feasibility studies that examined relocating existing crossings for operational and safety improvements. And what we found out is that these a la carte type fixes are not feasible. Next slide. Union Pacific requires, these are their requirements. First, they consider a major roadway reconfiguration or change in use to be a new crossing. Then they say that Union Pacific, other railroads, the U.S. Department of Transportation, and most states encourage communities to carefully consider all alternatives, including grade separations, as opposed to the request for the creation of a new at-grade crossing. The cost of a grade separation project should not outweigh the enhanced safety it would provide for the traveling public. Yikes, right? Next slide. Good. You're ahead of me, Laurent. Thank you. So they go on to say every effort must be made to obtain alternative access using grade separations, parallel or other roads leading to existing crossings, and access from other directions. They expect communities to engage in a study to identify crossings for closure. And they want us to identify 3 or more crossings for closure for each proposed quote unquote new crossing. Right? And so we know this whole area, we're already kind of short on crossings, right? So basically, in order for us to move forward, we've got to do the work. They want us to do the work. What concerns me is their statement about, cost being no object. I don't really think that's a practical requirement there. I don't know if you know how much those flyovers cost, but they're not cheap. So what we're looking at in terms of the investment of this plan is a total build out of nearly $500 million in the region. And that would be funded using a combination of local, regional, state, and federal formula or competitive funds over the next quarter century. So a little bit in the short term, that's not including the stuff I talked about with the CAPM and the lighting, 16 million there. And then 140 in mid and long term. Next slide. And so I have a recommendation for you, but before I get that, I'd like to bring Tammy Quigley up to speak a little. She's the division manager from the Office of Transportation Planning at Caltrans District 2.
Thanks, Michael.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair and board members. Tammy Quigley from Caltrans. I'm here to lend my support for a long, I would say, unmet need. You've heard this term through the transit lens. I want to bring it forward with the lens that the Envision 273 document clearly represents in a lot of detail. We have talked about this partnership to bring this effort forward for years. We, on the Caltrans end, have piecemealed it, which has afforded us the opportunity to bring a ton of improvements to the CAPM, recognized we needed some lighting through specific prioritized corridors. And I'm here to commit that with this plan, we were able to bring it to a level that's called a comprehensive multimodal corridor plan. And that is something on the state side that is very, very important, as it's not only going to allow us to continue to program funds with money that we have at the state level through the shop, it's also going to allow us to go for funds that come to us either through a formulaic, which we may have now or may see in the future, as well as the competitive grants. This plan sets us up to succeed. On the side of the railroad, we have made several runs at trying to use the word run, I guess it's popular today too. We've made several runs at trying to partner and commit and get the railroad folks at the table, and we've not been successful. And I feel very strongly that this plan cues us up not only to get the funding to help pay for them to be at the table, which is actually probably what Caltrans may need to do, or we may need to come and talk about seeking some funds through Caltrans and bringing that so that we can have enriched conversations about some of the things that Michael spoke to you about and some of the things that are actually identified in this plan. This is a very unique plan. When we talk to a few other folks at Caltrans, they're very excited about this plan as to showcase it as what can be done. When we're working with several entities on a very long and priority corridor, this corridor is the dedicated space for people to walk, bike, and roll, as there are no other spaces for them to do so. We have long visioned and again, made short runs at trying to get those connection pieces with a little piece down in Anderson and a few other pocket pieces. And what we're really looking to do is take this plan, move projects forward that you've already seen are programmed, continue to work towards those short and medium, long-term, get some feasibility studies where we know we have some pinch points with railroad and other sections, some utility stuff. There are some environmental things we want to go ahead and take a look at so we can get that connection points between the city of Reading, the county of Shasta, and state of Anderson, as well as vision longer than this, that we can connect our folks on the northern end of Shasta Lake City. I'm here to answer any questions, but I want to lend my support for this. I want to tell you that Caltrans is committed as a whole to continue to program. On a side note, we just got funding in the 2024 shop, which is what the Downtown Reading project was. It was my #1 program. We identified over 40,000 linear feet of need for folks to walk, bike, and roll. And I understand this plan is more than that, but we take it as a priority, and we're committing a lot of money to help bring the lighting and some necessary safety improvements, as well as removing barriers and mobility. And I'm here to say that we're going to continue on that commitment. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Dan. Next slide. So that brings us to the golden moment, the staff recommendation, fingers crossed. It is a three-part recommendation. I am asking that you
Quite dramatic,
approve,
Michael. By the way, that was very dramatic.
right? I am very dramatic. Ask any of my coworkers. You have no idea. Approve the Envision 273 Comprehensive Mobile Corridor Plan. That's my first recommendation. As part of that, we are also asking you to adopt Resolution 2507 attached to the staff report that provides concurrence that the Envision 273 Comprehensive Multimodal Corridor Plan meets state requirements for such. And it also authorizes Sean to do any necessary assurances to that point. Let me get the exact recommendation, because I think that part's important. You should have included it for their other slide. It's any other steps needed to provide documentation of CRTA's approval of the plan to Caltrans and or the California Transportation Commission. And then the third part is to direct CRTA staff to work with Caltrans and regional partners to pursue grant funding for that regional railroad crossing study. Any questions?
Three of us are going to have to leave here shortly, so I will quickly make a motion to approve all of them.
I'll second.
I have one comment. I think that on the railroad study, we need to look at more than just the 273 corridor, like City of Shasta Lake, Highway 151 has very substandard undercrossing. There's also an at-grade one in Cottonwood. So I think that item number 3 ought to be that the railroad study look at.
Well, that's not part of the 273
Yeah,
plan.
But still, if we're going to undertake grant funding for regional railroad crossing study, that's more than the 273.
Can we do that?
Yeah.
I mean, that's how I
That'd be great.
envision it.
We could look at opportunities and we can discuss Caltrans. If there's anything where there's certain restrictions, there's certain crossings we can't. We'll just-
I think it's already in there because it talks about.
Amend it?
Yeah.
Chris,
Yep.
you amend your motion?
Absolutely.
Vanessa amends your
Yes.
second. Perfect.
Second.
Okay. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
With
Okay. Thank you, county reps.
Have fun, guys.
Now we're going to talk about county funding.
You're funny, right?
I knew you would.
It's not sending.
Sense of humor.
Happy birthday, Matt Plummer.
Thank you. It's your birthday?
Last Saturday.
Oh, I would have brought a cake.
Next time.
Okay.
Here you go.
For matter of record, Chair, I just want to recognize that the 3 county representatives have left. However, the board still has a quorum and still has 4.
1, 2, 3, and 4.
We still have 2 action items before the board, and we can still move forward with potentially approving those items. So with that, I'll hand it back to the chair for item 13.
Okay, so item 13 is triennial performance audit report for fiscal year 21-22 through 23-24 for SRTA and RABA.
That's correct.
Jen,
Jessica,
Jessica.
sorry, I get it.
Start with the chair.
So every 3 years, we have to do a triennial performance report as part of the Transportation Development Act compliance. So our 3 years here are starting July 1st of 2021 and ending June 30th of 2024. We have an independent auditor from Moore and Associates who ended up being our consultant to do that, the TPA for both SRTA as the regional transportation planning agency and RABA as the sole transit operator in our region. And just in summary, SRTA received 2 compliance findings, which had to do with late submittals for both our audits for 2 of the fiscal years and our financial transaction reports that go to the state controller's office. In summary, it was a kind of snowball effect where one audit was late, which had the second audit start late, which finished late, et cetera, et cetera. We do have 12 months to submit that audit, and those were past due by a few months. We have since hired more financial staff. Who I'm so happy to have Kelly here helping me. We have high hopes that future audits will definitely be done by that June timeframe. And then the financial transaction report specifically, I was under the understanding that those figures needed to first be audited before they could be submitted to the controller's office. I have recently been educated that that is not the case. And so this fiscal year, I was able to submit them on time before the deadline because I just used the financial figures that I had, and we're awaiting the audit to be completed for the 23-24 year. So that specific finding has already been remediated. And then on page 2, the functional finding has to do with performance oversight of our transit operators. The auditor recommends that we have a more formalized system for recording our performance oversight of RABA. And they suggest that we add 2 forms to our annual TDA claim for the transit operators to receive the TDA funds, which are local transportation funds and state transit assistance, and that would be formalized in that document as a submittal. Not to say that we have not been overseeing their performance. They do system performance reports regularly at their board meeting. We have our own oversight through various reporting entities that we are able to track what they're doing.
So this means RABA has to do another report for you.
Well, they actually hired some.
Each year, they already submit a TDA claim to get those funds that we budget in June for them and to have us be able to distribute those through the county payment instructions. The auditor is recommending 2 more forms, which they have in the report included templates that we could go by, but we first have to identify performance metrics that we want to have them formalized, and then other things that we need to work with RABA to make sure that it's feasible for everybody. But
And RABA's already agreed to this and they understand.
To be clear, this is a functional finding, so it's a recommendation. And so they track these functional findings, but they're not compliance related. And so it's kind of to have the most efficient and best tracking for performance as the regional transportation agency. They highly recommend that we have some kind of formalized system for that.
I'll add that too. We've had conversations with RABA, and because too, one of the forms is related to how does RABA respond to their training performance audit and any findings that they have. So it's a form for them to provide, hey, here's the findings that we identified in the report. How have you addressed those? And it's a report to the agency. The other one on performance metrics and service performance is a form we've talked with RABA about. They said, yes, it's something we can work on because the example given to us is kind of essentially a kind of a more system-wide performance versus RABA through the short range transit plan and other efforts has developed different performance metrics for the different types of services. So we would look to be a little bit more exhaustive to match with what they have. So we have a way to report that and evaluate those, and it would help inform further the Unmet transit needs process in the future. So
this is an auditor making a recommendation.
Yep.
And it's called scope creep, and it's how auditors grow governments out of sight. So we haven't done this. We're not hiring. I'm assuming we're not hiring or creating a transit operation productivity committee. We're not doing that.
We're not doing that. And in fact, this is a repeat but edited recommendation from the last triennial performance audit where they did suggest a formalized committee for performance report, of which the board decided not to do that. And then we also identified that the Social Services Transportation Advisory Council.
Wow.
The SS TAC, they kind of oversee performance and how those needs are met. And there's many other places that we oversee their performance. They just edited this to be like, well, prove it to us, show us in a formalized way in some kind of form, having RABA check off boxes that puts all that information that they release throughout the year into one single document. And so our intention, of course, is to never increase the burden that RABA has in reporting to us that when we already have the oversight. So we're going to try and find a very simplistic, non-intrusive way to do this. But again, this is just a recommendation. And by accepting this report, we aren't accepting complying with the recommendations, if you will. I just want to make that clear. You're not going, this doesn't mean we're going to incorporate the forms. We're going to figure out a way to do that and coordinate with RABA. And then lastly, just briefly, we did summarize RABA's report, which I believe that the RABA board had a presentation on the 21st of their triennial performance report. The consultant wasn't there, but it was the same consultant. And it was just noted that RABA may benefit from a dedicated financial staff person outside of the entity of the city of Reading, most primarily to administrate grants and the administrative requirements that come along with applying for and actively managing grants. Someone dedicated to RABA specifically. And that was also a functional finding. It was not a compliance finding. RABA had no compliance findings in this triennial performance report. So I just recommend that you please accept the report as the board.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Gallagher and seconded by Audette that we accept the report. All in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
That's right. Okay, so we are on 14.
We're on, if you'd be so kind.
The overall work.
All right. Go ahead and go to the next slide. All right, we're back again with the overall work program. Just as a reminder, what is it? It is primary purpose is an application for consolidated planning grant funds. And it also serves as a contract for state planning grant funds. It also has secondary purposes that is an agency work plan and a tool to allow the board, colleagues, and state and federal partners and the public to monitor our progress over the year. Next slide. What's in it? It's comprised of two sections. The first section is an introduction or a prospectus that describes our region, the challenges, us, our organization, and how we do our work. Second part is work elements, and those describe what we're going to do, how we're going to do it, why we're going to do it, and that's through the narrative portion. And then there's some fun numbers in there describing how we're going to pay for it. So it includes a list of tasks and deliverables and a schedule and a table explaining where the money is coming from. So some of these work elements are core activities, stuff like the overall work program itself is a core activity, stuff like the regional transportation plan is a core activity. And others are for specific efforts with limited time frame. In the current fiscal year, there was a work element for my 273 plan, and it's not going to be around next year because I'm done. Next slide. So this is
Well, there will be more for you to do, Michael.
No, I know. I've already got a list.
Don't be relaxing, mister.
No, it's good though. It's job security.
I already have them on the next one.
So this is our process, our annual process of the overall work program. In December, I come to you with a list of proposed regional planning priorities. You review, provide any feedback. In February, based on those priorities and the feedback received, I develop a draft plan with draft work elements and draft budget. Again, you review it, provide any feedback. And then in April, I take a quote unquote final draft to you and hope that you approve it. And then it gets submitted to our state and federal partners. So what's new this year? Not a whole lot. There is a new work element to update the Go Shasta Active Transportation Plan, which is getting a little stale. We filed for some grant funds to pay for that. So this is a conditional work element. We're expecting to hear about that sometime this summer. But in the meantime, it has to be in the work program. Every year we get Formula SB1 funds. This year's Formula SB1 funds are augmenting an existing work element 70118 for the regional freight plan. This year we're also going to begin work on our regional transportation improvement plan. That has one of those ongoing work elements. It's always in there. And our total estimated budget is a little over 4.5 million this year. So this is a significant decrease of over 1.6 million. And that's primarily due to the completion of 2 discretionary planning efforts, 273, bus to rail, and also due to estimated revenues and expenditures. So now we're kind of back more in line with what we've been here. So I have a 4-part recommendation. First one is to approve the overall work program and to adopt resolution 2504, also attached to your staff report, which basically says you approve of the work plan. I'm also asking you to authorize our executive director to sign the overall work program agreement, which is a form that has to be submitted with the plan, and provide all certifications and assurances that all the requirements have been met, including future amendments to these documents as needed. So if they come back and said, no, that's not right, you can do that without having to come to you. Yes. Also asking you to authorize the executive director to make administrative amendments to the OWP to correct errors and address further comments as part of the approval process from our state and federal partners. And then we're also asking you to authorize our director to sign the indirect cost allocation plan submission certification. And that's it.
Okay. Motion?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Okay. Made by Tanessa and seconded by Gallagher. Any other comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
So are we going to go back to item 5 for Caltrans, or are you going to go ahead right now?
It
Sean?
is up to you, Chair, how you'd like to move forward, whichever direction.
Well, why don't we have the Caltrans presentation?
Okay, we'll do that. So as he comes up here. So, our record, we're gonna move back to agenda item number 5. Receive a presentation from Caltrans District 2. And project manager Mateo is going about Caltrans's 2025 construction project look ahead. We do this, we moved it up from used to do it in June, try to do it now in April, so it's ahead of the construction cycle. But Caltrans to share about different projects. I know from elected officials, board member perspective, this is informative for you. So that way you're aware of different projects. So if your constituents will say, hey, what the heck's happening with these guys all out on the street? You at least have a reference, and depending on facilities, you can say, hey, go ahead and go to Caltrans construction website, or you can call Mateo and ask him, hey, what's going on? So with that, I'll hand it over to Mateo.
Thank you, Sean. Hello, Chair and members of the board that are left here.
Don't be offended. Don't be offended.
Don't worry.
My name is Mateo Diorio, and I'm a Caltrans project manager for Shasta County. Started about 8 months ago, so still getting into the rhythm of everything, but I've got a quick snapshot of some of the projects that we're looking at, both in construction as well as design and planning. Currently on the screen is the Fix 5 Cascade Gateway project. I'm sure you've heard a number of things about this project. It will be going to construction soon, and we'll move on to that. Also on the screen is the East Palisades bike path. This runs along the I-5 corridor. Northbound under the Hilltop Drive between the Mission Del Oro area, as well as south of the supermarket area and shopping mall. A good intermodal project that we'll talk about a little bit more further on.
Is that along the freeway?
That is, yeah, it's going to be a long.
Backside?
Yeah.
East side.
Can you go to the third side, Ron? So on that top left corner in gray is that East Palisades bike path along the east side of the northbound I-5.
Okay.
Okay, let's go to the second side. Thank you. Before we go into the intermodal projects, we'll talk a little bit about the targets that shape the future of the bike pedestrian infrastructure. There is a current 10-year target of 206,000 linear feet. That would be for State Highway Operation Protection Program cycles 2026, 2028, and 2030. So with our 2026 program, we've already planned out about 100,000 linear feet just in that program alone. So about 50% of the whole 10-year plan. I will have also highlighted different projects that feed into this program. The Bernita Johnson Park, which we'll talk about later, as well as the Hilltop Bridge, which we'll also talk about. Okay, next slide. The East Palisades bike path goes north-south along the northbound I-5. Construction plan for 2027. Also in that area is another project in planning called the Hilltop Drive Bridge Widening. And so that will be a project to widen the north side of Hilltop, as well as provide pedestrian bike connectors down from Hilltop to the East Palisades bike path.
Is that the black part?
Yes, so it's not the
That's for
whole,
bicycles?
it's not
For
the
pedestrians?
whole black on the Hilltop portion. It's
Just
just the
the-
north side and then the connectors.
That's what those things coming out are?
Exactly.
And the
so
gray
that-
is the bike path?
The gray is the new bike path, exactly. And those connectors are currently in planning right now. We're still working out the kinks.
So those funny two loops, those are bike paths coming
Those are
down
bike ped connectors.
to get down at a 4% grade or something like that.
Exactly. That's the challenge because that's a super steep slope.
Yeah, but
right on the east
people
side.
on bikes, they have lots of gears.
Some do, some don't.
And not in wheelchairs.
Yeah,
Those are
exactly.
wheelchairs don't.
It's ADA compliant ramps as well.
No wonder they're so long, huh?
Yeah, exactly. So we're working out the kink of those bike paths, the connectors.
Of course, I'd much rather see another on-ramp
That's
going
true.
onto I-5 going north, but
I'm pretty sure. That's Chuck E. Cheese, right? And
That's
the
achieving this one.
yeah, that's Chuck E. Cheese. So that it takes you over to
And
Palisades.
so they want to widen the bridge over I-5, is that the project?
Yes,
Yeah,
that's
but only one lane?
So we'll,
You said
yeah, we're only widening the north side.
because there's more traffic going north because you don't have an on-ramp there onto I-5.
We're not going to add capacity for the bridge. We're just adding pedestrian infrastructure.
Use that word.
Okay.
Okay, how does someone get to the bike path? Because I don't quite understand where that leads to.
To which
If the
way?
bike path is the gray,
The gray.
how
So
are
this-
those black
that's a good
loops?
question. This is gonna be a pedestrian intermixing area where the paths physically merge together or some type of roundabout. So this is gonna be intermerged where the gray and the black go underneath Hilltop Drive, under the bridge.
so the gray looks like it goes under the bridge. The black
Yes.
obviously doesn't look like it goes under the bridge. So the entry point so if you're on Hilltop
Yeah.
and you want to get down to the bike path, what's your,
Palisades.
where do you do that?
So you go from on top of Hilltop and then you come down this grade and you connect underneath the bridge. This black here is underneath the.
Okay,
bridge
so the
at same
entry
grade.
point is on this right side
Yes.
or the
Up on
left
top.
or,
so you're gonna be under Hilltop Drive, you're gonna be over I-5 on that path. It's a suspended.
no,
No,
that's
no,
fine.
that's
I'm just trying to
underneath.
figure out what the entry point is. So if the entry point is like by the Chuck E. Cheese side, like, so it's on this east side of it, right? So your entryway are the two,
Yeah, you're coming up to Hilltop Drive here
and then you go down
you go
and around and go
down
underneath.
and go underneath.
Yes.
Correct.
So you're tunneling under I-5?
No.
There's the,
Where's the,
there's
you're crossing I-5 there? or
No,
you're
no,
not?
no.
It's going north.
That's where it ends.
They're gonna walk.
Again.
No, I understand.
Underneath.
Got you, okay, I got you.
That's what I was
It ends there at 5. The path is not crossing.
Running to, there's already bike, and sidewalk facilities on the south side of Hilltop, working with City of Reading to make sure the north as well, that they currently don't exist, so folks will be able to ride or bike on the north side of Hilltop and then use that north side entrance to get onto East Palisades. So no matter which side of Hilltop you're on, you will be able to access, because you can't cross at Hilltop over the bridge, it's not a space for people.
You can cross right there at
Site
the,
distance issues.
So either there's down at Browning, or there's not a crossing that people can get across. They'll be going underneath I-5 to be able to, essentially a pedestrian multi-use facility for like a pedestrian interchange, because it'll be changed. It's not under I-5, under.
Okay.
Under-
Thank you.
So I'm just curious, like if you're at Chuck E. Cheese, how do you access either?
You have to, there is, through the parking lot, there's an area where they have a space that's up. You have to either get to the sidewalk that is along Hilltop to go up.
And then you go down.
And then you go down.
and around.
I was just saying, our understanding, it's still in design discussions, Caltrans and Reading to figure out all the details, what exactly it's going to look like. This is just a high level graphic.
Yeah.
What's going to happen.
This is a boatload of spend. I'm just gonna call it out. This is my sensibilities. This is a boatload of money to add bike and ped lineal feet when they could cross at Browning because there's a four-way stop right there. You're only going, what, 400 yards maybe up the hill? To where? You're not going anywhere. You're just making a loop out of it. Like cross at Browning and get over to Palisades right on the bottom side at Browning.
Yeah, and we're reviewing all of these items.
Yeah,
This is only in 30% planning right now. So this is a current.
Shotgun blast that thing right about now and that cross at Browning.
We're reviewing it.
This is a huge amount of money to get this done.
Sidewalk on this.
Yeah, there's no
sidewalk
there's
is about
no
this
way,
wide.
yeah, you
Like you
can't.
cannot walk across that bridge.
But the goal is also folks to get across Hilltop Bridge where they can't effectively do so. So it's not just north and south, it's also the east and west connector, reconnecting the communities on both
Okay, gotcha.
sides.
On Upper
Yes.
Hilltop versus
So,
Lower.
correct.
Okay.
So we are effectively doing all of Highland Park neighborhood and the next trail
Yeah.
all connects and then everybody can get from the mall. So it's all direction.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, because I was,
You're good. It's all
no, I'm
connected.
not. I'm actually off a little bit, but that's okay.
Yeah, you should cross Hilltop and walk across it and see how safe.
Oh, no,
Yeah.
I drive it on a regular basis. I get it. No, it's a narrow bridge.
It makes me nervous to drive it.
Terrifying.
Yeah.
Mikhail, on the bottom right picture, bike path going north.
Well, we're gonna go through all of them. Yeah, so the next project is the bottom left. That's the Bernie to Johnson Park bike path, along 299 between Bernie and Johnson Park. That's gonna be in construction in 2029. And then in bottom right is the Northeast Reading bike path in East Reading, new culverts, pedestrian bridge, drainage, construction in 2031 pending ATP grants.
There's no physical barrier between the freeway and the bike path. It just,
It
there's
just keeps the
10
bikers
feet.
off the road.
Correct. Yeah, that's the current. All right, next slide.
You can move on.
Sorry, but to go back one, what was the ACP, Keith, was the question on like the ACP grant funding on it?
Physical barrier on
I
the,
would imagine there would be a barrier there.
on the Bernie to
And
Johnson.
a guardrail would
No,
just.
for the northeast Reading,
Well, yeah, because
because we're talking about a huge speed differential there.
yeah, well, there's access control. So there's the fencing for access control. That's a
Because you've done it along 299 going to the college.
correct. It wouldn't just be open. So that, but to Mateo's point, it wouldn't be something where we typically look because we have the horizontal separation. We don't have a required vertical, but there would be access control, but not in the sense of where we look at a more protective vertical separation
Like a
specifically
median
for the
barrier or
class.
something.
Correct. So there will be access control, but we have we're far enough away outside the clear recovery zone is the goal, so that we have the horizontal separation away from United.
Okay. Now for a project that will go to construction this year, this is the Lake Shaft Viaducts, a little bit north of Reading along northbound I-5. It's a bridge rehab of 3 viaducts, as well as shoulder re-enhancement and lane pavement replacement. Northbound I-5 will be shut down for about 60 days for 1 lane at a time. 1 lane will remain open. And then when the right lane is closed, the rest area, O'Brien rest area, will also be closed.
So this is just before you get to the rest area?
Yes. And right around the rest area as well.
And what is it you're doing to that half bridge?
We're rehabilitating 3 viaducts along I-5, as well as the shoulders and the lanes between them. They're starting to crumble and fall apart. Some of the approach slabs are in bad shape. We're doing some methacrylate and polyester.
So it'll be 1 lane through there. while you're doing
One wing will remain open,
Yes.
yes.
Closer than Labor Day weekend.
it?
It's fall.
Probably not.
That's the first thing I looked at.
That's what I was thinking.
So construction will start in the fall. We're not exactly sure when that would start. Likely after Labor Day weekend, but it'll be a little tight.
You will not be allowed to
Add that to your
have a
minute.
late Labor Day.
What about when all those college kids come down to Shasta Lake? Oregon.
Memorial. That's
You'll have two- You're saying you'll have two
We'll
lanes
have
open.
restrictions.
We want them to
Keep
get
it
here.
moving, keep it moving. We're at 3 hours.
All right, next up is the Brighter 273 safety project. Michael already talked about this in depth, so I won't go into too much. But it is a safety project, median barrier and lighting, coming in construction on 28/29. All right, next up. As Michael also previously mentioned, other projects along 299 for 273 corridor, Wyndham safety lighting, Point of Clear safety lighting, and then downtown Reading Cat Ban, all to help prevent accidents, add additional lighting, and help the overall safety of the board. All right, next slide. Here's just a quick snapshot of the construction maps. I handed out a couple of those as well. Please let me know if there's any questions on the projects. I know this was kind of a fast whirlwind, but that's some of the projects in the area that we wanted to highlight. And then my contact information is to the right as well. If you have any additional questions. Thank you all for your time.
Let's see that. Thanks for the update. It's nice to know.
Thank you.
Questions?
Now, all our questions left. Wait a minute.
I'll
You're
make
the
comments.
speech giver.
Yeah, I never ask
You're the
questions.
speech giver.
Thank you for the clarification on the hilltop. No, I think it's great. I actually, now that I understand the
Yeah.
actual, it
Yeah.
makes sense. And it's
It'll
good.
be for the east to west.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. That's the community.
Okay, so are we back to 15, Sean?
Yes, correct. We're back to 15.
I'll make it, can you make it quick? I do have to
Yes.
bail out of here, but I don't want to.
I will make it quick here.
Do we have anything else we have to vote on?
So there's a few things that we're tracking and we're with in the correspondence. So we had a letter from a statewide group for the statewide needs assessment. We've shared that with your respective planning or public works departments. That's a key thing for BNO show our gaps and needs for transportation infrastructure. This next cycle, it's done every 3 years, and there's an emphasis on including on bridges. So we've shared that and we encourage our partners. Last cycle, we had 100% input provided, and that's key for us to be able to see funding and pursue that. This last week, Shasta and Butte County had a wonderful conversation with the California Air Resources Board related to greenhouse gas reduction targets, the guidelines that they have and where the state is headed. And CAR presented their schedule for their regulatory requirement to review the existing Senate Bill 375 greenhouse gas reduction targets. They provided just kind of a draft overall picture of kind of just where they're at in the schedule. We anticipate some workshops this spring and summer, a potential draft target report in fall, a final report, and they have to do an environmental analysis in spring of 2026 and final targets in fall 2026. They did recognize that the current business as usual targets that we have statewide that represents a 19% reduction. Each region is slightly different. So our target, for example, is 4%. They presented some other very high level scenarios that they're looking at to address related to statewide targets. We will be waiting to participate in the workshops to see what the details are. I'm sure that the NPOs are going to have a number of opinions related to those and what those may show. As you know, with prior updates, we've discussed that the NPOs are holding that for now, existing targets should remain the same, and that we need to have a greater conversation as a state on reform to Senate Bill 375 so it reflects current conditions that rather than those from 18 years ago related to the zero emission vehicles that we do have, funding, the CEQA streamlining that was envisioned under SB 375 that we're not really realizing, and maybe taking more of a qualitative approach rather than quantitative approach. So we will continue to participate in those discussions and provide updates in the future. Directors from several North State transportation agencies are in the process of trying to schedule meetings with our representative congressmen. So in this case, Congressmen LaMalfa and Kylie, to have conversations about the next federal transportation bill, to be able to share how we can inform their process and bills for transportation needs in rural areas, and what their goals may be. So we're working on trying to schedule a meeting. Some different topics that the group has discussed is reduced local match on federal grants programs, for example, more direct access to federal dollars via formula rather than having to do a lot of competitive programs there. Also streamlining administrative activities, as well as at least more funds potentially towards maintenance and infrastructure is a need that is ongoing. So we will see. We're trying to schedule a meeting here in the next few weeks or months. So if we do meet, I'll provide an update then. Earlier, several staff, including myself and board member Audit, participate at CalCOG's Regional Leadership Forum. There's a number of great topics related to transportation planning that we have going on, discussions about reform to SB 375. We had discussion about economic development, what other regions are doing, and also how to kind of navigate the current federal environment where we're doing a lot of impacts as the current administration is making changes. What is that doing and what might we see that in terms of delays in project review, especially for federally funded transportation projects? We are seeing that. We're trying to navigate that as best as we can. We continue to try to stay in communication with federal partners, but we are seeing staff reductions. That is creating some challenges for the cities, the county, for SRTA, for Caltrans as well. And getting those projects reviewed, we're running into issues right now where certain departments within don't have a staff person assigned, and so they're trying to take up workload, and that is delaying projects across the board. We're hoping to see that clear itself up so we can move projects forward. Also, I sat on a panel related to small regional agencies doing different transit type projects. So I shared lessons learned in our partnership with Dignity Health Connected Living on Shasta Connect services, rural transit services, Sunday service in there. And then I would be remiss if I didn't mention that two of us, myself and Keith Williams, were on one team, and other staff and board member Audit were on others. Bill Higgins, the director, does this kind of very transportation California specific. He calls it the Super Californiistic Let's All Be Precocious CalCOG Trivia Contest. Keith and I were on the winning team and last year's team. And our awards were these little cups that we had. So we had a good time. It's kind of a social thing for people to kind of meet, talk together, talk about California. And Bill has some very random quiz trivia items that you're like, where did that come from? Can't have gotten off TikTok or something. But it was a great time to be able to talk about different topics, get together, have a little bit of fun during the conference there. We do have some upcoming events. In May, CalCOG has a board meeting and legislative day. Board member Audit and I have signed up to attend that in May 27th to see where the state of things are at in legislation, may inform things that we discussed in June. And then the CTC, California Transportation Commission, has a couple of workshops and meetings in May that staff will be attending. And we already talked about FHWA staffing challenges. That is extending my update to the board for this week.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. So, Vanessa,
Yes.
he already covered most of it. Since we paid you to go to
I'll
the
give you-
meeting,
I'll
you
give you-
must report to the
Yes,
board.
happy to. So the conference was very interesting, in light of the fact that, which we talked about in December, when the new administration came in, that there would be, we were asking, don't you think there's going to be some severe disruptions? And they said no. But now they know that there are many, many disruptions to business is happening. And so it was interesting in light of that, sort of the discussions that were happening. One thing that I thought was interesting was they were talking about different types of metrics, like that maybe greenhouse gas is not a great way to measure progress. They had assumed that people that would have electric vehicles would actually drive less, but they don't. And so it still clogs up the freeways. And so the people, with gas powered cars are still, polluting as much because you're spending just as much time, and people aren't traveling less because they have an electric vehicle. So they're looking at that. I don't think anything has been definitive, and I haven't seen the language for that. But the other interesting, they had a panel, they had people from, I think they were elected officials, and they were saying like, they just can't understand why it's so expensive to build housing, because just so you know, our transportation agency is taking on building housing and funding housing because they want you to have your housing location close to your transportation. And so they're trying to work together, and Bill Higgins obviously has that talent. And so he was able to do that. So, but they were talking about, they can't understand why, it's so expensive to build housing in these urban areas, which is silly. It's called regulations, but they didn't put those two and two together. But they were talking about one of the problems was that corporations kept hiring people from out of the area, and then they would commute to work. And so these electeds were talking about possibly putting forth a bill to force businesses to only hire people that have a short commute. And therefore that would be a way to control vehicle miles traveled. So I don't know that we're heading in a direction that they're seeing things differently. I would say over and over and over again, there was a demonstration that the more regulations you have, the more difficult it is to have all of these goals met. But nobody's really putting that together. They're just trying to figure out more legislation that they could force, the goal to happen. And so I don't think that they've seen the light. I think if it isn't a balance of happening of power, I think things are going to continue on the same vein until they have to change. So we have run out of federal money. And so I don't think that the plans are going to go as they have been. So maybe it will slow and delay things. But it doesn't seem like electeds are catching on at a pace of which the influence of maybe what our letters or something would say, but we'll stay at it.
Very good. We're on 17 future topics, but I think we've about run out. And so
I'd like to, I don't know, Don, if you can look into, or somebody could look into, that earlier, and I want to say it was Jennifer's presentation, but it was about electric vehicles and gas tax, fuel tax, and vehicle miles traveled and all those things. It's like when you reduce how much I drive my diesel truck and pay 24 cents a gallon, every gallon of gas that I pump into it, and it's a lot, who's going to make up the financial transportation dollar that's coming from that 24 cents through SB1?
Oh, yeah, that's what everybody talks about.
Where's the difference? So and nobody,
big.
right?
Well, vehicle miles
so
travel tax
it
is kind of what they're experimenting with right now.
which is evil, but that's okay.
Well, you have to imagine it actually
You have to understand why they want to go there.
disproportionately hurts people from lower incomes, which is the problem. It's just, it's
Yeah.
very, very heavy on them because they mostly have to commute because you can't afford to buy a house in an urban, to buy housing. So you're really so that's at odds. So they're trying to work that out as well.
So on that topic,
Progressivism.
yeah, I think what is into that is that there are going to be some items that CalCOG is working on. That they're informative and provide essentially what is the state of where we're at, where they talk about transportation fund in general and that system. So as their materials come out, and they have, CalCOG has partnered with Caltrans on a grant that they pursued to be able to do this analysis, I would call it storytelling, if you would, to be able to say where we're at from the past, where we're at today, what does that potentially mean for the future?
Yeah.
And so I'd say as the material comes out, we'll share that. And I think that will play into a number of elements for us as well, as we look ahead to our regional transportation plan update and those other things of, what we assume, what we look forward ahead to, the challenges, changes in our region, where is the state headed, how are they going to handle that? And I can tell you that at the California Transportation Commission level, that continues to be a discussion that's brought up to say, hey, we are anticipating a funding gap. And they're trying to get the attention to the legislature, but the state legislature seems reticent to tackle that on for whatever
Because
reason.
they have a mandate.
And so I think there's a number of elements where it's going to be fun to continue to keep coming, but on that end, we'll continue to share information as it comes out. I understand what you're saying. I think CalCOG in the next year is going to have some really good info for all of us and how that will play out.
Well, one can hope.
in conclusion, I have never chaired a meeting where so many board members got up and walked out. But I would appreciate all of you that stayed for all 3 hours and 9 minutes now of this meeting. So that said, we are adjourned.
If any board members do not want their 273 plan, I will find a